The world was once so peaceful you could hear a single raindrop fall. But then the things called gates suddenly appeared, shattering all order. In an instant, hordes of monsters and demons poured out, pushing the entire world to the brink of extinction. However, there was a small minority of people capable of standing up against these monsters. They were called the Awakened. In midair, a young man with blonde hair and an arrogant air appeared, a long sword in his hand. He swung the sword like a flash of lightning. He unleashed slashes so fast, the naked eye couldn't follow. The massive monster was sliced into thousands of pieces of flesh that scattered through the air. And the blond young man just stood there, his expression cold. His face was indifferent, as if he had just done the most trivial thing in the world. But this very act completely shook Li Jun's mind. With just one move, that person had annihilated the monster, a monster that he himself couldn't even touch. This incredibly cool blond young man who had just appeared was Gum Lion, Li Jun's best friend, and the heir to his family's entire renowned martial arts legacy. He clutched his bloody arm, thinking bitterly to himself, if only I had also inherited my family's talent, I wouldn't have fallen so easily like this. The more he thought, the more Li Jun felt his blood boil with jealousy. He clenched his wound, ignoring the blood that flowed ceaselessly. If he could be as strong as Gumliang, he would be the one standing coolly on the battlefield, fighting to save everyone, not sitting here clutching his injured arm, helplessly watching his best friend shine. Li Jun was a painful exception. An F-rank awakened one who didn't carry any special bloodline within him. No matter how desperately he tried, no matter how hard he pushed himself, Li Jun was still stuck at the lowly D rank. If only I had inherited my family's talent and achieved a higher rank than D, would my life have been different? That thought only made Li Jun despair even more. At that very moment, the system screen suddenly appeared. Martial arts trait unlocked. Li Jun stared at the words in surprise. What the hell is this? He wondered. Then he let out a laugh. Are you kidding me? Even my luck is pathetic. I'm about to die, so what's the point of unlocking it now? Li Jun's eyes gradually grew heavy and closed, his life being drained away by blood loss. He knew he was about to croak. His hand clenched the ground as Jun seethed with bitterness. A final thought entered his mind. What a useless awakening system. Just as darkness was about to swallow Li Jun's last breath, a brilliant light suddenly flashed. To be more precise, an invisible magic circle unexpectedly appeared before him. Li Jun's eyes flew open, feeling as if he had been pulled back from the gates of death. When he was fully conscious, the young man found himself lying on a soft bed. For some reason, his entire body no longer ached. Li Jun shot up in a panic, his eyes quickly darting around the room. The surroundings were so familiar. The desk, the bookshelf, the neatly arranged furniture. He was stunned for a few seconds, then dazedly wondered, what the hell is this? Is this my dorm room? The more Li Jun thought, the more confused he became. This was definitely his dorm room, but he had clearly moved out after graduating high school. So why was he lying here now? The memories of the moment a beast chomped on his arm, of fighting to the point of exhaustion to protect civilians, were still vividly etched in his mind. Why am I here? Didn't I die from that wound while protecting people just then? A strange thing appeared before Li Jun's eyes, causing his pupils to instantly dilate. A strange screen had appeared, on which the date was clearly displayed, January 2nd, 2025. The moment he saw the date, Li Jun couldn't help but scream, 2025? No way! The scream made people passing by in the hallway turn to look, wondering what he was going crazy about. Inside the room, Li Jun was still in a panic. His head was spinning, unable to make sense of what was happening. Is this a dream? This is totally surreal. The young man decided he had to check for himself. Li Jun placed his feet on the floor. Trying to stay calm, he opened the dorm room door. The morning light streamed in, illuminating everything. The scene outside was completely peaceful and serene, without a single trace of destruction or bloodshed. Friends were jogging in the morning. Others were practicing their swordsmanship with the professor. These scenes were sights Li Jun used to be sick of seeing, but now they were happening right before his eyes once more, as if everything was just beginning. Li Jun's eyes widened, feeling he could no longer deceive himself. Did I go back 7 years in time? The more he thought, the more absurd it all seemed. Li Jun dazedly returned to sit on his bed, resting his chin on his hands as he started to analyze everything from the beginning. Did I really come back to life? I definitely died from the fatal wounds to my side and arm, and that was just a moment ago. I could still feel that excruciating pain, yet now it has vanished without a trace. Returning to the past with death as the starting point. Something I thought only happened in novels is now actually happening to me. He lifted his shirt, revealing his torso. The old wound that had caused him so much agony was now completely gone, leaving no scar behind. Li Jun muttered to himself, "What do I do from now on?" He knew all too well that in just 7 years, a terrifying great war would break out, and the future Li Jun, despite all his efforts, was ultimately powerless to stop it. Li Jun temporarily pushed aside his worries, took a deep breath, and reached out to lightly tap the system screen in front of him. "All right, I'll just check my status first." Immediately, a series of stats appeared clearly on the screen. A detailed status window for Li Jun. On it, the nickname logo stood out, along with basic parameters. Stamina 10 out of 100, endurance 10 out of 100. His strength and agility were just as pitifully matched. Not only was Li Jun not particularly bright, but his physical abilities were also completely undeveloped. And yet, looking at this information, Li Jun felt excited. He wondered to himself, is this the path selection window, the same one I saw before I died? If so, then that martial arts trait that was unlocked. So what's this going to be like in the end? You reach out and touch the newly appeared martial arts trait. A notification immediately appears. Martial arts trait has been unlocked. Please choose your path. Once chosen, it cannot be changed. Li Jun hesitates for a moment. On the screen, a series of legendary ultimate techniques are displayed. 9 Suns Holy Technique, Bodhidharma's Muscle Tendon, Change Classic, and the 9 Yang Divine Art. All of them were peerless martial arts that anyone would covet. Li Jun thought to himself, so I get to choose one of these, huh? In my past life, I couldn't do anything but die in vain. All right, I'll choose this one then. This life, I definitely won't make the same mistakes again. Nowadays, the entire Asian region, and South Korea in particular, has a setting identical to that of a martial arts film. To understand the reason for this problem, we must go back to the era of the first-generation Awakeners, who originally had 2 choices. One was magic and aura from the continent of Grantis, and the other was martial arts from the martial world. Europe and the Americas chose Grantis, while Asia chose the martial world. That is the root cause of why the world today is split into 2 such different halves. Li Jun mused for a moment. Right now, outstanding martial artists are everywhere. I wonder if there are any who exist independently, without belonging to any faction? He swiped across the screen, trying to filter out all the martial arts belonging to the 3 kingdoms to find his answer. The result was, the screen immediately displayed another series of martial art names, and among them, one caught his eye. The Divine Art of Chaos. According to Li Jun's knowledge, the Divine Art of Chaos didn't belong to any sect or faction. It was a completely independent martial art. As if he had found his true calling, Li Jun didn't hesitate to select it instantly. But the moment his hand touched the screen, he froze, his heart feeling like it was about to leap out of his chest. The screen displayed a notification. You have acquired the SSS-Rank Divine Art of Chaos. Li Jun exclaimed in shock. I just chose an SSS-Rank martial arts trait? Well, what's chosen can't be changed. Time passed, and the sun began to set. On the mountain behind the school, Li Jun was sitting cross-legged, training alone. Memories of his past life crept into his mind. This very place was where he used to train in secret, partly because he liked the quiet, and partly because he didn't want the scrutinizing eyes of others on him. Li Jun shook his head hard to banish the memory. I can't dwell on the past anymore. From now on, things will be different. He took a deep breath, trying to focus completely on his training. Abundant spiritual energy began to surround Li Jun's body. He could clearly feel the difference. The blood in his veins felt like it was boiling, full of vitality. Li Jun smiled, looking down at his 2 hands. So, this is what an SSS-Rank martial art feels like, huh? Just then, the system screen appeared before his eyes once more, clearly displaying the details of the SSS-Rank Divine Art of Chaos, Level 1, a technique that helps the cultivator gather and absorb the essence of the sun, moon, and earth, compatible with all types of martial arts. Li Jun felt the spiritual energy surging within him. This power was completely different from the 3 Origins control technique he had practiced in his past life. Even though he had only just begun to experiment with the Divine Art of Chaos, Li Jun had to admit that its rate of progress surpassed all common logic. Li Jun clenched his fist, his heart burning with determination. With this miraculous martial art, he believed he, too, could become strong. At that moment, the system immediately opened the first main quest for the SSS-Rank Divine Art of Chaos, entrance training for the Origin sect. The difficulty was rated at level D. Li Jun stared intently at the information on the screen. A drop of sweat silently rolled down his cheek as the young man thought to himself, "This is going to be pretty tough, isn't it? But with the way I am now, I can probably do it." Time passed quietly. As the moon hung high overhead, Li Jun was still immersed in his training. He focused all his mind, maintaining extreme concentration. He was so completely swept up in the terrifying spiritual energy around him that he couldn't break free. Just then, a strange voice rang out, seeping into his very consciousness. "Foolish child, you keep stumbling around like a newborn. That's enough. Open your eyes." The words seemed to hold a strange power. They pulled Li Jun from the state of cultivation that had trapped him. He jolted awake, his entire body drenched in sweat. Li Jun coughed violently in pain, his body trembling as if he'd just survived something horrific. Once he managed to calm down, he panted and wondered, "I'm alive. What just happened?" He looked down at his trembling hand, feeling the flow of the divine art of chaos, still refusing to stop. If he had kept trying to train just now, he would have really been dead and gone by now. As Li Jun was still in a daze, the mysterious voice spoke again. "You have returned from death's door." A faint light enveloped him. Li Jun turned and looked around, but he couldn't determine where the sound was coming from. He stood up and asked cautiously, "Excuse me, who are you?" Suddenly, the person appeared right behind him and let out a low chuckle. "Who do you think I am?" Li Jun spun around in shock. Under the full moon, he saw an immortal elder dressed in pure white, his eyes kind yet majestic. Li Jun stammered, trembling. A ghost?" That question enraged the immortal elder. He bellowed, "You foolish brat, what do you take me for? How dare you compare me to those wandering spirits?" Li Jun, stunned by the scolding, didn't even have time to react. He hesitated and asked again, "So, if you're not a ghost, then who are you?" The immortal elder gradually calmed down, cleared his throat, and spoke slowly. "Listen closely now, I will only say this once. This old man is the strongest person in the history of the martial world." The words made Li Jun freeze for a few seconds. He frowned and muttered, "The martial world? I feel like I've heard that somewhere before." He tried to search his memory. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as the memory came flooding back. It was on the system screen when he chose the divine art of chaos. The system had introduced it as a technique created by a martial artist at the end of his life. Model, after attaining mastery, Li Jun stared in shock at the old sage before him, thinking to himself, "It can't be. You're the master who created the chaos divine art." The old sage chuckled. "Seems you're not a complete idiot, are you?" he continued, his voice deep yet warm. "It's because my current form is just a spirit. That's why it's hard to recognize me, isn't it?" Li Jun was silent for a few seconds, then grabbed his head and screamed frantically, "Unbelievable! Do people who create martial arts actually exist? I've never heard of such a concept in my entire life. How are you able to talk to me? Don't tell me. You're not alive anymore?" The old sage rubbed his temples, his voice full of frustration. "Because the chaos divine art fell into the hands of a foolish kid like you, I can't rest in peace inside it." The chaos. Divine art is the most powerful thing that has ever existed. If it were to be spread around, it would cause huge problems. That's why I've appeared, to prevent that from happening. Hearing this, Li Jun broke out in a nervous sweat. I think I get the gist of it." The old sage shot up, looking furious. "The gist of it? Just the gist of it? You insolent brat! How dare you speak that way to a master whose prestige is as high as the heavens? Do you have any idea how many thousands, tens of thousands of people are lined up just waiting to hear a single word from me? What, are you even listening to me?" Li Jun's ears were ringing from the shouting, feeling like his eardrums were about to burst. "If I stay here any longer, I'll just get a headache." The young man looked for an escape, smiling sheepishly. "Yes, sir. I have to go train now. See you later." The moment he tried to leave, the old man continued, "Try practicing the control technique for a full 100 days. If you don't suffer from chi deviation, you should thank the heavens." Hearing this, Li Jun turned back with a completely surprised look. The old sage remained calm. "Why the surprise? I'm just telling it like it is. If you keep training in your current state, you won't even reach level 2 in your next life." Those words echoed in Li Jun's ears. Li Jun scowled and complained. "You never encourage me. Why do you always have to say such harsh things? If I want to get stronger, what should I do?" The old sage answered bluntly without hesitation. "There's no training regimen you can follow." Li Jun tried to cling to hope. "Somehow I'll make it work." The old sage fell silent for a moment, quietly observing Li Jun from head to toe, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Finally, he snapped his fan shut and chuckled. "I like your spirit. All right, I'm already dead anyway, so being a little generous won't hurt me." After that bizarre, surreal night, Li Jun returned to his normal life as a high school student. It was still an early morning coffee, but in reality, he didn't feel at ease at all. Li Jun quietly let out a sigh, but before he could even finish exhaling, the old sage suddenly appeared right next to him. He yelled loudly, "You're so lucky and yet you're sighing? What for?" The young man's soul nearly leaped out of his body. Li Jun quickly patted his chest to calm himself, muttering, "Please stop appearing out of nowhere like that. You almost gave me a heart attack." Trying to regain his composure, Li Jun glanced at the notification that had just popped up on his phone. Payment successful. 4 million won for a smithy in the city. The old sage saw the pained look on Li Jun's face and reminded him nonchalantly, "This is the only way to improve your skills." Li Jun was speechless. The skill this enlightened martial artist was talking about was wearing a 50-kilogram shackle on his leg. When he went to the smithy to order it, the strange look from the blacksmith practically pierced right through him. He even blurted out a question that made Li Jun just smile wryly. "Are you serious, kid?" Now Li Jun could only slump over the table, sighing in frustration. "Isn't this method a bit too primitive?" Hearing this, the old sage flared up and yelled, "If it were anyone else, you'd be dead by now for complaining so much." His pride wounded, Li Jun immediately slammed the table and shot to his feet, shouting, "You said you wouldn't nag me about that anymore!" But the old sage was still invisible. As a result, in the middle of the quiet cafe, Li Jun was yelling all by himself, making everyone else look at him like he was some kind of freak. The young man's face turned red with embarrassment as he slumped back into his seat. Whispers started to ripple around him. "That guy must be crazy," Li Jun sighed, reminding himself. "I won't say another word." He quietly opened the system screen. His ability stats had changed, but overall it was still insignificant, just a drop in the ocean. Li Jun thought to himself, exasperated. Leveling up my abilities is harder than I thought. Even so, after absorbing the Chaos Divine Art, his internal energy limit had skyrocketed to a value of 621. It made even Li Jun whisper to himself, "The Chaos Divine Art is definitely a very powerful martial art." The old sage, looking pleased, cleared his throat and emphasized, "As your master, I must stress this once again. That is my one and only principle. The Chaos Divine Art is the fruit of my life's work, the profound internal energy technique that gathers the essence of martial arts." Even though he had heard this speech until his ears bled, Li Jun couldn't deny one thing. It was thanks to the old sage's guidance that his training in the Chaos Divine Art had become much easier, and that was why he had quickly reached level 2. Li Jun reached out and selected an item on the system screen. At that very moment, the phone next to him buzzed repeatedly. He picked it up and glanced at it. The old sage immediately asked with a curious tone, "Where are you going?" Li Jun didn't hide anything, stating calmly, "The smithy finished making the iron shackle." He pushed the door open and stepped out of the cafe, but before he could leave, he suddenly ran into some uninvited guests. Before him, 3 thugs were blocking his path. With a malicious glint in his eyes, the leader sneered, "Well, if it isn't the kid who fell out of a tree," he continued his scornful tirade. "I'm surprised a recluse like you, who locks himself in a corner all day, would actually come outside." Li Jun silently watched them. The guys in front of him were all his classmates, level E. Nothing special, but still better than the level F he was stuck at in his past life. Unlike Li Jun, they had all inherited their bloodlines. Li Jun just sighed softly and said in a low voice, "Don't start trouble with me, just go on your way." But the guy wouldn't let it go. He stepped forward, shoved Li Jun's shoulder hard, and sneered, "Listen to what this piece of trash is saying. You must be itching for a beating, copying an attitude like that." The whole group burst out laughing, then said to each other, "Oh, I forgot. Ki Hong told me not to mess with him until the opening ceremony, my bad." Those words sent a chill down Li Jun's spine, but the guy wasn't done yet. He continued to provoke him. Want to come with us? We're on our way to the holy sect. Who knows? If you tag along, maybe they'll treat you a little better, huh? Li Jun's lip curled as he coldly uttered two words. Shut up. The leader lowered his voice mockingly. Aren't we arrogant? Well, you're from a lowly bloodline anyway. What if Master happens to see you and decides he wants to duel you? You know how that'll end. Before the taunt was even finished, Li Jun couldn't hold back anymore. He shot forward like a flash of ice and swung a powerful fist. The punch sent the guy flying, a bright red arc of blood spraying from his nose. Li Jun calmly gazed at the masterpiece he'd just created, his eyes cold. The other two guys stood frozen, unable to believe what they were seeing. Li Jun turned his head to look at the one still sprawled on the ground and said coldly, I told you to shut your mouth. Immediately after, his cronies charged forward in unison, screaming, You bastard! You've gone too far! But Li Jun didn't even bother to dodge. He began to circulate his internal energy. His breathing steadied, the power inside his body began to surge, and his eyes sharpened with intense focus. When Li Jun opened his eyes, all of their movements suddenly slowed down in his vision. Every step, every punch, was like watching a slow-motion replay, so predictable it was easier than taking candy from a baby. Li Jun raised a hand to block the first punch and then countered powerfully. He grabbed the first guy's arm, spun his body, and with a gentle twist, snapped it. The movement was light, but a horrific scream echoed out. The man immediately clutched his arm, writhing in agony. The last guy, the one with the gelled hair, refused to give up and charged forward, throwing a punch. Li Jun calmly reached out and caught the fist cleanly. The guy froze, completely baffled as to what was happening. Li Jun increased the pressure in his hand, tightening his grip on the other's fist. It was just a light squeeze, but the gelled hair guy started screaming his head off. His body went limp, and he collapsed pathetically to the ground. It only took a few short minutes, but the outcome was an absolute disaster. Li Jun stood in the middle of the small battlefield, his eyes scanning the scene. His voice was low, tinged with a bit of weariness. I know. I'm a failure who couldn't inherit the blood of my ancestors. Old memories suddenly flooded back, wrenching at Li Jun's heart. Those were the dark days of his childhood, when he had to endure senseless beatings from his own mother, at only 7 or 8 years old. Li Jun was constantly berated by his mother. The words he heard most often were, You ruined my life. You're the reason I have to live like this. I have to kill you! Cruel beatings, furious chases, leaving behind nothing but a child, crying and fleeing in desperation. In that despair, Li Jun had seen his father as his last ray of hope. That day, he had clung to the hope of pleading with his father for help. If only he would save him from his mother. If only he would take his side. But his father's expression from that moment is forever etched in his memory. It was a look of absolute, ice-cold contempt. And then he turned his back and walked away decisively, as if the boy before him wasn't his own son, but some kind of stranger, or even something loathsome. Li Jun, only 8 years old at the time, was stunned. Hunted by his mother, completely abandoned by his father, with the whole world turning its back on him. That scene, that memory, was seared so deeply into his mind that it left him speechless. He had tried to reach out, to grasp that last fragile sliver of hope, but that man, his father, had decisively closed the door to that house of hell with his own hands, leaving Li Jun behind, leaving him to suffer the horrific beatings that a child like him should never have had to endure. That terrifying memory continued to haunt Li Jun even into adulthood. In his previous life, he did nothing to earn his family's acknowledgement, but this life would be different. A fierce glimmer of determination now shone in Li Jun's eyes. He clenched his fists and told himself, I will not let this chance I've been given go to waste. I will obtain strength on my own and hold my head high. I will not live like I did in my past life. I will never let anyone hurt me again. Li Jun's incredible transformation today was all thanks to what happened last night. He had gone to the clearing on the mountain behind the school to cultivate the art of primordial chaos, a martial art born from chaos, an immortal cultivation method that only activates when the body is pushed to its absolute limit. And the old immortal, of course, personally oversaw his training. The first lesson he had for Li Jun was to become a Sun Wukong 2.0, carrying a massive boulder on his back, with the old immortal sitting on top as a bonus to train his endurance. Li Jun yelled out in alarm. "Is this really the right way to do this?" The old immortal frowned and barked, "This brat? You're that exhausted and you still have the energy to talk? You still have a long way to go. Stop spouting nonsense and keep moving." In the dead of night, long before the first rooster crowed, a pair of legs quietly wandered through the deserted forest carrying a boulder. Li Jun, completely exhausted, collapsed to the ground, panting heavily, his limbs so numb he couldn't even stand up. The old immortal looked down and snapped, "Who gave you permission to sit down? Get up!" Although Li Jun was frustrated, he was too exhausted to argue. He opened his system screen to check his current stats, and as soon as he looked, he was so shocked he nearly passed out. The Art of Primordial Chaos had reached 2 stars. The first main quest is complete. There was even a reward for leveling up so quickly. Li Jun was astonished, unable to believe his eyes, and even more surprised that the system was actually giving him a reward. Instantly, a gold ring appeared in his hand. The reward, the Ring of Origin. Li Jun squinted, observing the ring. "Whoa, it looks good. The design is pretty complex, too." The old master cleared his throat and said smugly, "That's because this old man here has a sharp eye. It's a chi artifact from our origin sect." Without hesitation, Li Jun quickly slipped the Ring of Origin onto his finger. As soon as the ring was on, a new notification immediately appeared on the system screen. It displayed a series of stats related to the Ring of Origin. This item would continuously gather internal chi in the origin sect's dantian, helping Li Jun avoid the risk of chi deviation. As Li Jun read, he anxiously wondered to himself, "Am I seeing this wrong? Master, is this really an S-rank item?" The old master fanned himself with a paper fan, smiling proudly. "Can't you see? It's a treasure of the origin sect." Li Jun was completely stunned, thinking to himself, "What kind of sect is this, giving me an item of this caliber? Is this really a good thing?" But he pushed his worries aside and decided to command the system to open the next journey. The screen immediately switched to a new interface. A notification appeared for the next journey to cultivate the Chaos Divine Art. This mission was called Regret of the Endless World, with a high difficulty level. Li Jun looked up and asked the old master, "Master, is the second option related to you?" But the old master, who had just been standing there talking and laughing, had vanished without a trace. Li Jun looked around worriedly, wondering, why did he suddenly disappear? "I'm sure he was just here." Seriously. Confused and with no one to guide him, Li Jun was forced to consider his options carefully. It wasn't until that afternoon, after he had dealt with those thugs, that the young man returned to his dorm, opened the system, and finally chose the Regret of the Endless World journey as his next step. A voice suddenly spoke up beside him. "Why did you choose that one?" Who else could it be but the old master, appearing and disappearing as he pleased? He tilted his head and asked, "The other 2 looked fine. Why didn't you pick them?" Li Jun smiled calmly and said, "I think this one is perfect." Then he suddenly feigned regret. "I was also considering the third one." This sentence, which had just brought a smile to the old master's face, now made him grit his teeth in annoyance. Li Jun glanced at his tsundere master beside him, thinking, "Well, I can't just abandon my master's path, can I?" The old master suddenly grew thoughtful, as if recalling something. Earlier, he had witnessed the 3 thugs bullying Li Jun, especially when the leader mentioned the Divine Power Sect. He asked directly, "What is this Divine Power Sect those guys mentioned?" Li Jun calmly replied, "The Divine Power Sect is a place where one can learn the martial arts of the Huangbo family." Hearing this, the old master stroked his beard, impressed. "A sect where you can learn the Huangbo family's martial arts? That is indeed alluring. Have you not yet mastered the Huangbo family's arts?" That question was like a knife twisting in a wound in Li Jun's heart, one that had been there from his past life to this one. He stared into the distance and said softly, "I didn't receive the bloodline inheritance." Bloodline inheritance, a 95% chance that a parent's cultivation techniques are passed on to their child. If the parents are awakeners, the child will naturally be born an awakener as well, with the cultivation techniques already in their blood. The remaining 5% are special children chosen for higher cultivation. Like the Dragon Sword of the Blood Sword sect, a family with the martial arts foundation of the Namgung clan. In the public eye, they are a family of geniuses. The old master sighed. How troublesome. In my day, I learned martial arts when I met my master. So, the reason your father abandoned you was because you didn't receive the bloodline inheritance? Li Jun gave a bitter smile, not denying it. The old master flew into a rage, slapping his fan into his own hand and roaring, "What an absurd reason! I can't believe he would abandon his own flesh and blood. A man like that doesn't deserve to be a father. You don't need to worry anymore. I am your master. I will teach you every martial art I know." Those words caused Li Jun's memories to come flooding back. One late autumn night years ago, that father had spoken coldly to the small child. "I guarantee you no one will ever trust you, and you will never be able to trust anyone. It's only natural, because you're a failure." That icy glare, those words, and that indifferent turn of his back. All of it still haunted Li Jun to this day. But this time, he wanted to try something different. Li Jun gave a small smile, looked at the old master, and said, "I'll be in your care then, master. But why do we keep talking about me? Tell me about your past, master." Hearing this, the old master jumped, breaking out in a cold sweat and stammering, I've made too many mistakes, so now I'm living in seclusion." Li Jun asked hesitantly, "So, are you a bad guy? Could you be the leader of a demonic sect?" This question made the old master furious. He started swatting Li Jun repeatedly, yelling as he did, "Get away from me! How dare you call me that?" The master and disciple chased each other around like that. But only Li Jun knew that from this moment on, he could finally trust someone in his life, gradually escaping the psychological shadow cast by his father's venomous words. Afterward, under the strict yet dedicated guidance of his master, Li Jun threw himself into cultivating the chaos divine art. The Awakeners here are much weaker than those from our sect, because they've improved their martial arts through techniques but don't understand the true essence of martial arts. What does it mean to fully comprehend martial arts? Li Jun trained diligently, following every instruction with the determination to become a genius awakener. Li Jun's footsteps could be seen gliding, drawing lines of chi on the ground. His speed improved unimaginably, his techniques became more refined, and his body was always overflowing with powerful ki. His master smiled and emphasized, "Soon, I will make you the second strongest person in the martial arts world." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Jun launched a palm strike at the wooden dummy in front of him. The astonishing power caused numerous cracks to appear on the wood. Then, with a crack, it split right in two. Li Jun stopped, a little curious, and asked, "Why only second strongest, master?" The old master fanned himself leisurely and chuckled smugly. "Isn't the answer obvious? I am the strongest there is." Hearing this, Li Jun was at a loss for words, but his master didn't let him rest. He snapped his fan shut and said grimly, "A life-or-death situation. Hanging by a thread is the perfect moment for enlightenment." Li Jun listened, not understanding a thing, and asked, "Where am I supposed to find a situation like that?" Just then, Li Jun suddenly felt that something was terribly wrong. His entire body broke out in a cold sweat, drenching the back of his shirt. He glanced cautiously at the old master and asked, "Don't tell me you mean we have to go find some place where strong monsters appear, do you?" Seeing the strangely excited look on the old master's face, Li Jun knew he'd hit the nail right on the damn head. The next morning, Li Jun quietly went down to the dormitory basement. His master tagged along behind him, asking, "Where are you going?" Li Jun calmly replied, "This place is called the Six Gates. It's in the basement of this building. It's very dangerous for awakened below C rank, so Headmaster Vo is the one managing this place. Rumor has it that the headmaster himself was the one who sealed the barrier." Just as he finished speaking, the two of them arrived at the place called the Six Gates. Before them was a massive door. It was sealed tight with charms and complex formations. Just looking at it was enough to tell what kind of horrors were contained within. Li Jun stood still, his eyes fixed on the formation, then sighed. "Just as I thought. They've sealed it up again." But his master beside him just shrugged nonchalantly. "A 5 elements formation, huh? I can get in easily." Li Jun stared at him, wide-eyed in shock. His master chuckled and said, "A 5 elements formation is easy to break. Just do as I taught you." After just a few minutes, the barrier door slowly creaked open, letting a faint glimmer of light into the dark space. Li Jun couldn't believe he'd actually broken the 5 elements formation. Stepping deep inside the Six Gates, he glanced back at the door behind him, his face full of confusion. It really opened. That was way too easy, wasn't it? But when he turned to look forward again, a giant vortex of energy immediately appeared before his eyes, relentlessly sucking everything in. Li Jun shivered and hesitated. This must be the barrier from the rumors. He was about to take off the iron bracers on his arms when his master glanced over and immediately asked, "My student, what do you think you're doing?" Li Jun shamelessly replied, "I'm just taking them off to get through the barrier." His master saw right through his scheme and instantly flew into a rage, yelling, "Don't you dare make excuses!" Defeated, Li Jun reluctantly put the iron bracers back on, screaming internally. It's hard enough to get through normally, and now I have to lug these chunks of iron with me, standing before that raging vortex. Li Jun couldn't hide his nervousness. His master gently encouraged him, "You don't need to be afraid, even though it's just the two of us here." Then suddenly his voice turned serious. "The time has come. I will now officially pass down my martial arts techniques to you." Li Jun was utterly astonished. He could feel a strange energy seeping into his body, changing him. The system screen immediately displayed a notification. Li Jun had learned the B-rank Heavenly King's footwork. From now on, he could officially use this movement technique. Li Jun was ecstatic. I learned a B-rank martial art? But his joy was short-lived. His master beside him snorted coldly. Perfect timing. Right in front of them, several giant beasts suddenly appeared, their eyes blood-red and savage, baring their fangs at the pair. His master said simply, "Get ready to fight." Li Jun clenched his fists and quickly got into a defensive stance. He absolutely refused to end up getting killed again like in his past life, just because some low-level monster bit his arm. His master calmly explained, "The Heavenly King's footwork I just gave you is the technique of the Huangbo clan, created on the foundation of pure strength. This technique has a few minor changes and is very simple, making it perfectly suited for your current level. Now show me your skills." Just like we practiced, Li Jun used all his strength to dodge each beast. Thanks to his relentless days of hard training, speed was no longer an issue, but these monsters attacked relentlessly. They didn't give him a second to breathe, just dodging a single blow already took too much of his stamina. Li Jun gritted his teeth, his eyes flashing with anger. The continuous attacks surrounded him, giving him no time to plan his next move. In that moment of desperation, his master's voice rang out like an enlightening bell. "Use the Heavenly King's footwork. 2 steps to the right, lean back as far as you can, then fall backward." Without a moment's hesitation, Li Jun did as he was told. He took exactly 2 steps, and just as the beasts lunged, Li Jun threw all his weight backward, and just like that, he had gained the upper hand. The beast's posture now revealed all its openings. Its weak points were clearly visible right in front of him. Not wasting the opportunity, Li Jun threw a powerful punch straight into the belly of the beast above his head. The beast couldn't withstand the fatal blow. It immediately coughed up fresh blood and dropped dead on the spot. This scene gave Li Jun a boost of courage. He cheered internally, "I finally did it. I defeated a monster from the 6 gates all by myself." But he had forgotten one important thing. Besides this monster, there were countless others bearing their fangs, ready to tear him to pieces. His master coldly reminded him, "You arrogant fool." Before his master could finish, reality slapped Li Jun awake. A chilling, murderous aura rushed at him from behind, making Li Jun whip his head around in alarm. In that instant, he saw an enormous mouth with hundreds of sharp fangs wide open and ready to swallow him whole. His master spoke curtly, a sharp warning. "You foolish child, it's not over yet." Li Jun had been too caught up in his first victory and had forgotten that this was the 6 gates, a place filled with danger, where a single mistake is paid for with blood or even your life. The monster's bite didn't miss. This time it wasn't his arm like in his past life, but fresh blood was seeping relentlessly from the wound on his neck, making Li Jun feel the chilling embrace of imminent death as he gritted his teeth, his heart filled with self-reproach. If he had been just 1 second slower, the Grim Reaper's scythe would have claimed my life. The beasts were still charging at him madly. Li Jun tried to dodge, but as soon as he dodged one, another one lunged from behind. In disbelief, he wondered when these monsters had managed to move behind him. Pressing one hand to the wound to stop the bleeding, Li Jun tried to calm himself and think of a battle strategy. "If I just keep dodging, another one will always be waiting behind me to attack. Master taught me the steps to evade, but a fight isn't just about dodging. I have to counterattack. How can I take them down?" Li Jun realized a critical mistake he had made in both of his lives. He had been too arrogant. Before he died in his past life, he was confident because he had awakened as a D-rank martial artist. He had trained very hard, but the harsh reality had slapped him in the face. That alone wasn't enough. Just as Li Jun was lost in self-blame, his master couldn't hold back any longer. He roared, "This is the time to be clear-headed and act!" That shout was like a sharp blow that pulled Li Jun back to reality. His master placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice encouraging, "Nothing is impossible. Don't lose heart, and keep using the Heavenly King footwork. Calmly wait for the right moment." These words reignited his fighting spirit. Li Jun took a deep breath, reining in his panic and regaining his composure. Gritting his teeth, he ripped off a piece of fabric from his sleeve. He wrapped it tightly around the wound on his neck to stop the bleeding. He focused with all his might, dodging the fierce attacks from the charging monsters, thinking to himself, "That's right. Enough with the useless thoughts. Time to get it together." Once Li Jun was focused, these monsters were no match for him. With a surge of spirit, Li Jun threw a perfect punch, landing it squarely on the snout of one of the beasts. The more he fought, the more ferocious he became, his punches and kicks flowing one after another without pause. In this moment, Li Jun had found his method of combat, maximizing his Chaos Divine Art and his footwork, the Heavenly King footwork. Time passed silently. 12 hours had gone by. Li Jun fought until he was utterly exhausted, sweat pouring down like a river, his strength completely drained. Despite this, the horde of monsters before him seemed unfazed. They continued to charge forward, not giving him a single second of rest. Li Jun gritted his teeth, his heart heavy. Their attacks have become less frequent. At this point, they're only focusing on defense. If I don't have any internal energy, then I'll just have to stall for time with my footwork. And so, Li Jun used the Heavenly King footwork to evade, trying to hold on. As he dodged, he silently waited for the Chaos Divine Art to recover his internal energy. His body felt like it was about to fall apart. Li Jun felt himself on the verge of collapsing, but thanks to his iron will, he remained standing. "I can't die here." Just then, his master spoke slowly. "It is time. When your enemy is exhausted, make their heads roll." Sounds great, Li Jun thought dazedly. But it's not just the enemy who's exhausted, I am too. Wearily, he asked the old master, "Can I rest for a bit?" The master shot him a sharp glance and said nonchalantly, "Do you think your recovery speed is faster? Or your enemies? Have faith in the recovery ability of the Chaos Divine Art. This is the perfect opportunity to improve your internal power and your stamina." Li Jun had no other choice. He clenched his fists, narrowed his eyes, and said decisively, "I will do as you say." Immediately after, he channeled his internal energy, which surged through his body. The look in Li Jun's eyes changed completely. His pupils blazed with spiritual power, filled with determination. His master, standing nearby, nodded in satisfaction. "Well done. To commend that spirit. After you overcome them, I will grant you a fist technique that suits you." Just as the old master finished speaking, a beast suddenly opened its mouth wide, its eyes bulging as it charged straight for Li Jun. But he just slowly raised his arm and effortlessly caught its snout. Then, in a single breath, Li Jun delivered a fatal blow, causing the beast to bite its own tongue and die on the spot. Clearly, his master's promise had given Li Jun a great deal of strength. He grinned excitedly. "Master, you promised." But in that very moment, Li Jun felt a colossal killing intent rushing towards him from behind. The aura was scorching hot and intense. In an instant, a gigantic beast appeared behind Li Jun. It opened its mouth wide, roaring in fury. It blasted a powerful stream of fire toward Li Jun. The flames raged, incinerating everything in their path, turning even boulders to ash. But where Li Jun had been standing just a moment ago, there was no one. The beast was stunned. It stared at the empty spot, never expecting that Li Jun had already leaped into the air before the flames hit. And from that perfect vantage point, Li Jun didn't miss his chance. He channeled all his internal energy into his arm, gritted his teeth, and roared, "Let's see you block this!" before unleashing an earth-shattering blow down upon the monsters below. If they weren't crippled, they were dead. Instantly, the system displayed an urgent notification. Li Jun's Chaos Divine Art had reached 3 stars. The system announced further, "The Chaos Divine Art has filled the empty dungeon." His stamina, which was below 10%, was completely restored. Li Jun could clearly feel waves of vitality returning. His body was brimming with energy. The system continued with another line of text. Li Jun's growth was so astonishingly impressive that he had received 25,000 accumulation points. He removed the iron collar from his neck. The wound was now completely healed, without a single scar. At the same time, the system announced again, an innate ability of the Chaos Divine Art, fear, has been unlocked. Once this ability is activated, the surrounding monsters will fear the user. And just as expected, the beasts that were so ferocious moments ago were now timid and wary. His master, standing nearby, smiled smugly, fanning himself and murmuring, "You truly are a prodigy. Who would have thought this kid would reach 3 stars in the Chaos Divine Art in just 2 months? This child is very similar to the first one," Li Jun asked, bewildered. "The first one?" The old master replied lightly, his voice elusive. "That was my first disciple. He is your senior brother." Li Jun nodded slightly in understanding. "I see." But as soon as he said that, he realized something was wrong. He immediately yelled, "You've had a disciple before? Then how many were there before me?" The master quickly covered his ears to keep his eardrums from bursting and grumbled back, "What's the big deal? You're one of my disciples too. There were 4 before you." Li Jun was furious. "Why are you only telling me this now?" But the master quickly changed the subject. Pointing towards the monsters, he said, "Look, they're getting away. Go fight them and finish them off." Li Jun frowned, looked around, and smirked. "Don't try to change the subject. They ran off while we were talking." Sure enough, there wasn't even a single beast track left in the area. The master irritably bonked Li Jun on the head. "That's why I told you to finish them off quickly. Are you not going to listen to your master?" "What are you doing? Hurry up and go after them." Li Jun tactfully reminded him. "You haven't forgotten your promise, have you?" The master took a deep breath and fanned himself. "Do you think an old man like me would go back on his word? This technique is called striking fist. It's the most basic fist style. What do you think? Want to learn it?" Li Jun was a little surprised and asked, "Is striking fist similar to the Heavenly King style? Is that the martial art of the Huangbo clan?" When the old master nodded in confirmation, Li Jun was silent for a few seconds before saying decisively, "I'll learn it." Immediately, the old master passed down the B-rank striking fist to Li Jun. The system also chimed with a confirmation notice. Li Jun sank into deep thought. A failure, who couldn't even inherit his gifted bloodline, was now learning the martial arts of a prestigious clan. If one day I become stronger than all of them, I wonder what they would think. But Li Jun didn't let himself dwell on it for too long. After receiving the striking fist, he immediately set off again to find the monsters. The young man walked and walked until his legs were numb with exhaustion. Still, he couldn't find any trace of them. Li Jun sighed, wondering, just how far did those monsters go? The master started nagging again. "I told you to take care of them, didn't I? This is what happens when you don't listen to your master." Li Jun tried to hold it in. "I already said I'm sorry. I'm being serious." Suddenly, his face froze. "Master? Aren't we looking for a mid-tier 4-tailed monster?" After the old master confirmed, Li Jun pointed. "Look over there!" Before him now was a blue fox. It was the monster that ruled this barrier, the blue fox's lair. This was the boss of this area. It could be compared to a red-level monster in terms of speed, and it was so strong that even a team of C-rank Awakened would have trouble fighting it. Therefore, this creature was on a completely different level from the monsters he had faced before. Li Jun was more tense than ever, knowing that one small mistake could cost him his life. The master, as if reading his thoughts, said slowly, "Don't be afraid. There is nothing more valuable than walking the line between life and death." Li Jun didn't quite understand and asked hesitantly, Do I still have to fight it?" The old master immediately yelled, "Go!" In my day, no one dared to question or talk back to their master. Kids these days are so suspicious. Even though the old master spoke harshly, Li Jun was still worried. Could he really defeat the blue fox? This was a real battle. No one could help him now. But then, Li Jun made up his mind. If he gave up and ran away now, how would he be any different from his past self? How would he be different from that weak, pathetic boy who was always beaten, always looked down upon? The dark memories came flooding back, the brutal beatings from those who had inherited the bloodline. He was once beaten to the point of exhaustion, his body staggering before collapsing flat on the ground. As he tried to get up, a dirty foot slammed down on his face. It was Li Ji-hong, the brat who led the thugs that used to corner him. Li Ji-hong pressed his head into the dirt. "The dungeon has been cleared. You'll never be able to fight again." The Li Jun of the past, though terrified, managed to ask, "Li Ji-hong, what are you doing? The principal would never allow this." But Li Ji-hong just replied coldly, "The principal already gave his permission." Those words were like a fatal stab, leaving Li Jun nearly speechless. Ji-hong, on the other hand, burst out into arrogant laughter. "I said he gave his permission. Beating a useless piece of trash like you is no big deal." At that moment, Li Jun reached the depths of despair. Tears welled up in his eyes, not from the pain, but from the humiliation. A humiliation so deep it choked him. For his entire life, he knew he would never forget that moment of disgrace. But no, this life had to be different. He had to become stronger, much stronger, and get revenge on them all, even on the clan that despised him. A man who has already died once. What is there left to fear? Li Jun pushed himself up to his feet, his eyes burning with determination. "Since I've come this far, it wouldn't hurt to bet it all." He looked up at his master and said, "I'll fight it." At that moment, the blue fox was still sleeping peacefully by the stream, but a sudden aura awakened it. It was the aura radiating from Li Jun. The innate ability of the divine art of chaos had been activated. Li Jun clearly remembered the effect of this ability. It was supposed to make surrounding monsters fearful, but that effect only worked on the small fry. Against the blue fox, that line of defense was instantly shattered. The system immediately displayed a notification. The blue fox's innate skill, Howl of the Pack Leader, has been activated. Thanks to the blue fox, the pack of smaller monsters not only no longer feared Li Jun, but their speed had even doubled. Li Jun was stunned. He had guessed his innate ability might not work against the blue fox, but he never imagined it would be completely nullified. Damn it. So this is the true power of the blue fox. The legendary beast was now fully prepared to chew his head off and drink his blood at any moment. Li Jun couldn't just wait to die. He gathered his internal power and yelled, "Master, I'm starting now!" But Li Jun was startled to realize his old master had vanished at some point. In that moment, a memory suddenly surfaced. The school's headmaster was his father, who had once coldly declared he would eliminate all useless people, including his own son, Li Jun. Snapping out of the flashback, Li Jun returned to reality. He was standing in the middle of the Six Gates Desert under the scorching sun, but the real heat was coming from the roaring flames created by the pack of blue foxes. He was completely surrounded by a sea of fire. A single wrong move would be enough to turn him to ash. But the blue fox and its pack of monsters were completely immune to this sea of flames. Li Jun forced himself to calm down. He knew he couldn't panic now. He needed to rely on the knowledge he'd accumulated about these monsters to compensate for his martial arts skills, which were still lacking. I've gathered knowledge about monsters, but it seems theory and reality are worlds apart. I might just end up as roasted meat. But in the end, Li Jun came to a conclusion. They'll scatter if their leader is gone. I have to finish it in one blow. In the blink of an eye, Li Jun lunged forward, unleashing a vicious kick, channeling all his strength, betting everything on this one all-or-nothing blow. But just as the punch was about to land, the blue fox vanished. Li Jun stood frozen for nearly half a minute, unable to believe it. The blue fox had dodged so easily, and more importantly, he couldn't see the damn thing anywhere. Just as he was reeling in confusion, a disgusting maw with razor-sharp fangs suddenly lunged at him from behind, trying to swallow him whole. Li Jun instantly took a defensive stance, gritting his teeth and cursing under his breath. "Damn it!" But luckily his master's voice rang out at that life-or-death moment. "Use the Heavenly King steps! Move forward!" Li Jun grabbed onto it like a lifeline without a moment's hesitation. He followed his master's instruction, instantly using the Heavenly King steps to flash in front of the blue fox. He had truly escaped death, and what's more, his current position was perfect for a counterattack. The blue fox let out an enraged roar, but Li Jun didn't flinch. He clenched his fist, his energy surging, and channeled all his internal power, yelling, "You think I'd die in a place like this?" As he finished speaking, Li Jun threw an earth-shattering punch with all his might. A heaven-shaking explosion erupted in the middle of the Six Gates Desert, sending yellow sand flying and blasting the entire area. Fresh blood stained the ground. The horrific battle was finally over. Li Jun was completely exhausted, his body drained. He collapsed to the ground, panting heavily, dazed, trying to pull himself together. Leaning against the huge blue corpse of the blue fox, Li Jun whispered softly, "Bet I'll die next time." The cultivation system immediately displayed a notification. You have defeated the monster boss with this incredible record. He received another 500,000 accumulated points and was gifted an extra 250 points as a sign of respect from the system for his phenomenal performance just now. Not only that, Li Jun also obtained a Grade B magic stone and a Grade A vampire magic skill. The blue fox's corpse gradually faded under the sun, leaving a strange manual on the ground. Only then did his master appear, chuckling. You've got a lot of useful items there. The Grade A vampire magic skill, with its ability to drain an opponent's life force, is the best way for you to improve. Li Jun, not hearing a word, immediately confronted his master. Where have you been all this time? I was calling your name in desperation. I thought you abandoned me because I wasn't valuable anymore. To soothe Li Jun's weary spirit, the old master coughed awkwardly and replied, Ahem, ahem, as if I would ever abandon my own disciple. It's not because I dislike you or anything. Li Jun was still staring intently at his hands. I defeated that monster, with these hands, in just one blow. His master offered advice again. First, just learn the vampire magic skill. Listen to me, your skills will definitely get stronger. Li Jun looked at him with suspicious eyes. He asked again, Really? His master scowled back. You think I'm lying? Li Jun smiled and ripped the book in half. The system announced, You have learned the Grade A vampire magic skill. You can now use the Grade A vampire magic skill. His master tapped his fan approvingly. Good. Now you just have one more thing to do. Use your vampire magic skill and drain all the blood from the monsters here. After a harrowing morning, Li Jun was finally back in his beloved dorm room. He put on his robe and opened the system's status window to check it. It displayed all his basic information after the update. His stats had skyrocketed compared to before. Li Jun was so moved that he shed tears of joy. He was now ranked higher than a Class C awakened in all 4 skills. His master appeared and asked, Hey kid, what are you doing? Li Jun smiled gently. I'm heading out now. He closed the system window and left the room. While other students were running for their lives, late for class, Li Jun strolled along leisurely as if he were sightseeing. His master looked at him dubiously and asked, My disciple, aren't you late for class too? Li Jun replied calmly, If I'm already late, I might as well take my time and be really late. His master almost fainted from anger and yelled, How dare you think that? You're supposed to look forward to your teacher's class. Li Jun just glanced at him calmly and chuckled softly. The only teacher I need is you, master. That one sentence was enough to soothe and sweet-talk the master's cranky temper. He chuckled to himself, pleased. Well, that's right, having one good teacher is enough. Li Jun thought to himself, My master sure is easy to please. But then a sudden voice called out, Li Jun, heading to school? Li Jun turned his head. It was those clowns from before, the ones he'd taught a lesson. The only difference was that this time they had brought Li Jihong with them. How could Li Jun forget that detestable face? Li Jihong stood there, his gelled hair blowing in the wind, smirking arrogantly and taunting, Look at you, acting all high and mighty. Li Jun just looked at him coldly and replied flatly, Don't start trouble with me, go on, get lost. But these words only enraged Li Jihong further. He said menacingly, We haven't seen each other for a few months, and you're still the same, huh? The official match is tomorrow. Why are you so confident? The master beside him was surprised to hear it was an official match. Li Jun quickly explained in a low voice, This is an official one-on-one duel on school grounds. It's where student rankings are decided. But from the outside it just looked like he was muttering to himself, which made Li Jihong even more annoyed. He kept growling, What are you mumbling about? What the hell is that? Even my patience has its limits. Li Jun, fed up, stared straight at Li Jihong and asked mockingly, Patience for what? What does a guy whose fists are faster than his brain have to be patient about? What's a guy like you got to endure? These words sent the blood rushing to Jihong's head, his face turning beet red. The students standing nearby couldn't hold it in either. They burst out laughing. Li Jihong was completely enraged. He roared, "How dare a failure like you talk to me like that?" Without another word, he charged forward like a wild beast, screaming, "I'll kill you!" But in Li Jun's eyes, this move was nothing but a joke. With just a slight step, he easily dodged it. After that, it was completely Li Jun's show. Li Jihong kept attacking wildly, punching and kicking nonstop, while Li Jun gracefully weaved past him, dodging with ease. He didn't even break a sweat. Not only that, but Li Jun even smirked mockingly. Inside, Li Jihong was starting to panic. He couldn't understand why he couldn't land a single hit on this failure. Suddenly, Li Jun's system displayed a notification for the first side quest. Defeat Li Jihong with an absolute victory. Reward, 100,000 reserve points. Li Jun smirked and thought to himself, "Master, really? Giving me a quest like this?" He channeled Internal's energy into his leg, changing his mind. He had originally planned to deal with Li Jihong in the official match, but decided he might as well take care of it now. All anyone saw was Li Jun stick his leg out and lightly trip Li Jihong. Jihong immediately felt the world spin as he fell hard to the ground. The pain made him grit his teeth, glaring daggers at Li Jun. Li Jun bent down, smirked, and said, "You're too slow." Those words made Jihong tremble with rage, his recklessness boiling over. He jumped up, ready to unleash a fatal blow. The atmosphere became extremely tense. The surrounding students fell silent, none daring to even breathe loudly. But what froze them wasn't Li Jihong's ruthless attack. It was because the terrifying blow Jihong had just thrown was easily blocked by Li Jun with a single hand. Jihong couldn't move an inch. He started to feel scared and screamed at Li Jun, "What are you doing? Let go of my hand!" It was a ridiculous sight. The attacker begging the one being attacked to let him go. Li Jun gave a faint smile. "I'll let go." And he really did let go. But in that exact moment, Jihong suddenly felt something was wrong. The energy in his arm was in complete chaos. A sharp pain shot through his entire arm. He clutched it and screamed in agony. It felt like his arm was about to be crippled for good. Li Jun looked down at him, his eyes cold. "I know what you were trying to do. Did the clan order you to?" "I don't plan on getting beaten again this time." Li Jun reached out his hand as a torrent of energy surged forth. A sharp, cold glint appeared in his eyes. "I'm going to return everything I've endured exactly as I received it." Jihong, truly panicked, stammered, "What are you doing?" But it was clear he couldn't stop it anymore. Li Jun finished him off in an instant. Jihong's terrifying, agonizing scream echoed, the last thing remaining after this swift takedown. Finally, Li Jun casually walked into the classroom. The system displayed a notification. First side quest complete. The reserve point reward was granted as promised. Li Jun smirked in satisfaction, but that attitude enraged the teacher. "Are you laughing at me?" Li Jun quickly wiped the smile off his face. The master beside him chimed in mischievously, "You're laughing like a pervert." The teacher roared, "You destroyed the student dungeon and injured a disciple of a prestigious clan. Do you have any idea what you've done?" It turned out Li Jun had been summoned to a faculty room and was being criticized by a group of teachers. But Li Jun remained calm and replied, "I have never violated the school rules." The teacher, furious, retorted, "And where is that written in the rules, huh?" Li Jun simply stated, "In Article 1, Section 4 of the regulations. When one senses killing intent from an opponent, they have the right to self-defense." And sure enough, there it was in black and white, clearly stated in Article 1, Section 4. This left the teacher fuming, unsure of how to rebuke him further. Just as the tension in the room was getting thick, the school chairman spoke up, stopping the enraged teacher. The chairman smirked, asking Li Jun in a condescending tone, "Let's just say you were acting in self-defense as you claim. So what will you do after this? Li Jihong is a well-known disciple of a ranking clan. They probably won't let you off the hook, will they?" This man was Han Min-sung, chairman of the Murim Military High School, from the main Gisa lineage, inheritor of the Zuza martial arts. Li Jun carefully observed Han Min-sung, thinking to himself, with that aura, he must be A rank. If it weren't for the primal divine art, I would have fainted already. But he remained calm and answered clearly, "The school does not need to worry about this matter. It seems everyone has forgotten, but I also belong to a ranking clan, and my father is the clan head. I will let my family handle this matter meticulously." His words were soft, but they silenced the entire room. Chairman Han Min-sung, however, looked intrigued. A hint of appreciation showed in his eyes as he looked at Lee Jun and thought, so there's another student besides the Sword Dragon, and who can withstand my aura. From what I know, he's supposed to be a failure, cast out by his clan. In the end, the meeting concluded just as he wanted. The atmosphere after the meeting remained tense throughout the school. Everyone was buzzing, talking about Lee Jun. No one had expected him to be that strong. Most were just surprised, but one person was bitterly resentful. It was the teacher, Kim Tae-hyung, the one who had yelled at Lee Jun earlier. He cursed inwardly. Damn it! That brat Lee Jun should have been dealt with. By looking after the disciples of ranking clans, I get expensive gifts, money, and even martial arts techniques, but that kid who was abandoned by his clan has ruined everything. If I let this go, not only will I lose their support, but the other clans won't let me off either. I have to deal with that bastard no matter what it takes. From then on, wherever Lee Jun went, he was followed by whispers and gossip. But he just ignored it all nonchalantly. So that's him, huh? The one who beat that tyrant to a pulp? How could a loser like him have done something like that? Lee Jun smiled faintly, whispering to his master. If that meeting had gone badly, it would have been a real mess, but luckily I have the primal chaos divine arts. His master smugly waved his fan and said, the outcome was predictable. Back in my day, I faced a situation just like yours. The 9 great sects and the 5 great families opposed me, and in the end, I won. Lee Jun listened, but he clearly wasn't interested. What he was focused on right now was the meeting from earlier. Lee Jun had figured out that the person who arranged it was none other than Kim Tae-hyung, his homeroom teacher, due to his close ties with the high-ranking families. But things were different now, especially with the problem with Lee Ji-hong's Dantian. Standing by the window, Lee Jun happened to overhear an interesting conversation from Kim himself. Tae-hyung was on the phone, sounding stressed. The incident with Lee Ji-hong was truly unfortunate. Even though I insisted on the meeting, it didn't produce any results. It seemed the person on the other end of the line threatened to cut off his funding. Kim Tae-hyung was startled, blurting out, "What do you mean, cut off my funding? Please, you can't!" Beads of sweat dripped down as he continued to plead, "If you just give me one more chance, I'll pay closer attention to Lee Ji-hong during the rankings." Hearing this, Lee Jun had pretty much pieced it all together, thinking to himself, looks like they aren't planning on holding an official match anymore. His master asked curiously, why does your family hate you so much? It seems like there must be another reason besides you not having the bloodline inheritance, right? Lee Jun crossed his arms and replied nonchalantly, it's because I'm an illegitimate child. My aunt can't stand me. My father loved my mother more. His master frowned. That's strange. If your father loved your mother, he should have protected you. Lee Jun gave a bitter laugh. He loved the family more than he loved my mother. He's the kind of man who would sell his soul to the devil for the family. His master looked at Lee Jun with sarcastic pity and remarked, you're a real lucky one, aren't you? You'd have to be pretty lucky to have it this bad. Lee Jun just smiled faintly. I'm used to it. He might be smiling on the outside, but how could he ever get used to something like that? In the past and in the present, his family always tried to drag him down into the abyss. Furious, Lee Jun tightened his grip on the soda can in his hand. He crushed it effortlessly. He was different now. He wouldn't let anyone, not even his family, bully him anymore. Time flew by, and soon enough, it was the first day back at school. The campus was still buzzing with chatter about Lee Jun. Hey, look, it's Lee Jun! He totally destroyed Lee Ji-hong. I wonder how strong he is. Can a D-ranker really change that much? Hearing this, the master's ego flared up again. Whose student are you anyway? Getting attention wherever you go, huh? Lee Jun caught on and replied with a smile. It's all thanks to you, master. Just then, Kim Tae-hyung looked toward Lee Jun and snapped, that's enough chatter. Follow me to class now. Then he began his instructions. I will generate a random simulated monster for you. As usual, you'll be fighting an opponent based on your own level. From now on, please enter according to your number. Aside from actual dungeons, there's no better place for an unexpected accident to occur than here, because the difficulty can be adjusted from the control room. He was already plotting in his head that he would increase the difficulty exponentially when it was Lee Jun's turn. Then I'll just pretend it was a system control error. Today is the perfect chance to get rid of this brat. Seeing Taehyung repeatedly glancing toward Lee Jun, the master muttered intently, "He's going to try and get rid of you. It's written all over his face. How can a guy like that be a teacher?" Lee Jun just smirked, thinking to himself that there was no way he was just going to take this. And then, it was Lee Jun's turn to step into the virtual reality room. Kim Taehyung's voice rang out with a sarcastic tone. "Is there any particular monster you'd like to meet?" Lee Jun replied flatly. "Anything is fine." Kim Taehyung gave a grotesque smile. "In that case, how would you like to fight a demon?" It should be known that demon was the term for awakened who were former criminals. The most prominent example was the Death Lotus criminal organization. Lee Jun smiled, thinking to himself, "I can't believe he's telling a student to fight people like that. So he's finally showing his true colors, huh?" He smirked confidently and said, "Then bring it on." Even though his malicious intent was obvious, Taehyung tried to play the role of a dedicated homeroom teacher until the end. He spoke softly into the microphone. "If a dangerous situation arises, and notify me immediately." Right after that, Taehyung coldly pressed the start button. A magic circle immediately appeared in the virtual reality room as a trembling light spread throughout the space. Lee Jun closed his eyes, concentrating to feel out the simulated location. This time it was a snowfield, difficulty D rank. When he opened his eyes a moment later, he was standing in the middle of a vast, foggy, and icy, snow-covered mountain. Kim Taehyung's voice echoed through the speaker, feigning concern. "Good luck." Lee Jun just smirked. "This guy is really trying to kill me, huh?" In the dense, snowy mist, Lee Jun's vision was limited. Moving became more difficult than ever, but the most terrifying thing was his opponent. The white-browed ice ghost, one of the leaders of the Death Lotus, the 7 demons. He wasn't some ordinary monster, but a notorious, crazed old man who took pleasure in killing. A true assassin. A chill ran down Lee Jun's spine. He couldn't believe it. A teacher would actually dare to make a student face someone like this? "You're insane, Kim Taehyung." The demon before him stood there silently, not moving, but the killing intent radiating from him was so thick it felt like it could suffocate everything. Suddenly, the system displayed a notification. "First emergency quest for Lee Jun, Will of the Youngest. You must use the Chaos Divine Arts to defeat your opponent. Clear condition. Only use Chaos. Divine Arts below level 2. The failure condition is using the Chaotic Divine Art above level 3? Lee Jun smirked. "Well, that just gives me another reason to win at all costs." Finally, 7 demons made his move. Without a word, he channeled his internal energy into his hands and unleashed a deadly palm strike toward Lee Jun. Lee Jun immediately shifted his body to dodge, but what he didn't expect was the aura that 7 demons released could change direction, circling back to hunt him down. This time, Lee Jun couldn't dodge. A fatal mistake. His arm began to freeze over. This skill was the martial art of the Frost Grandmaster from the Northern Sea Ice Palace. But 7 demons didn't stop there. He shot towards Lee Jun at an unbelievable speed, raising his hand to deliver a fatal blow. If this attack landed, he'd be crippled, if not killed. Lee Jun immediately raised both arms to defend, but the strength of this crazy old man was too immense. He struggled, but refused to back down. The white-browed cold demon, even as a simulation, possessed unbelievable skill. He was truly a difficult opponent. However, Lee Jun was no longer the failed brat from his past life. He perfectly blocked the attack, his whole body trembling with excitement as he thought, "Now this is what I call interesting." Lee Jun counterattacked instantly, unleashing a retaliatory strike. His powerful aura erupted, shaking the entire snowy mountain region. With incredible speed, Lee Jun slipped behind 7 demons. He prepared to launch a devastating blow, but 7 demons was no fool. He predicted Lee Jun's move and quickly dodged the fatal punch. Lee Jun let out a cold smirk. "I can't let this chance slip away." Wherever 7 demons dodged, Lee Jun pursued. It was a cat-and-mouse game between 2 evenly matched opponents. Lee Jun wasn't intimidated at all. In fact, he felt exhilarated to be facing such a strong foe. But 7 demons wasn't just good at dodging. He began to channel all his energy into his hands. Both sides were ready to unleash their palm strikes in a direct confrontation, their killing intent soaring. And then, just as it seemed the two were about to clash in a one-on-one duel, Lee Jun suddenly realized something was wrong. The demon in front of him suddenly vanished. The thing Lee Jun had just punched was merely an illusion. 7 demons had disappeared without a trace. Li Jun furrowed his brow, realizing what had happened. Did Kim Tae-hyung shut down the system? Frustrated, he kicked the floor hard. It was just getting to the good part. Outside, Kim Tae-hyung was in a state of extreme panic. He stared at the flickering virtual reality screen, wondering, what is this? His aura is causing the system to malfunction? The shock on Tae-hyung's face was clear. Even though it was just a simulation, the difficulty of this match was at least C-rank. Not even the most experienced students, not even he himself, could easily fight against Li Jun. The more Kim Tae-hyung thought about it, the more furious he became. He let out a roar and slammed his fist into the virtual reality screen. Inside the VR room, Li Jun was now extremely relaxed. He paid no mind to what was happening, closing his eyes to meditate, enjoying the sense of relief after what felt like a breathtaking battle. The cultivation system promptly sent a notification. First urgent quest completed. The accumulated rewards were immediately added to Li Jun's account. He smiled with satisfaction. Thanks to the origin points, Li Jun was finally recognized as D rank. From a pathetic, useless F rank, he had jumped to D rank and had even knocked out that bastard Li Ji-hong. Thinking about this, Li Jun told himself, at this rate, I'm more than strong enough to challenge the major guilds. While Li Jun was lost in a beautiful dream of his glorious future, a voice suddenly called his name, pulling him back to reality. He turned around to see who would dare interrupt this rare moment of enjoyment. And there, before Li Jun's eyes, were the faces of his classmates. But it wasn't the look of contempt he used to endure, but one of shining admiration. They shouted excitedly, Li Jun, you did great! You're really strong! The scene left Li Jun stunned for a few seconds. The young man stared in bewilderment at the 180-degree change in his classmates' attitude. For the first time in both of his lives, Li Jun had received such warm recognition. He let out a chuckle, the warmest smile he had ever shown. This isn't so bad either. His friends didn't hear what he mumbled and asked curiously, what did you say? Li Jun just shook his head slightly and smiled happily. Oh, it's nothing. From that day on, Li Jun's life changed dramatically. The moment he stepped into the school lobby, a crowd of underclassmen all bowed respectfully. Greetings, Senior Li Jun. The overwhelming sight left Li Jun standing frozen in the middle of the lobby, unable to help but question his own existence. What the hell is going on? Then the student leading the group stepped forward and spoke politely. I'm Heo-su, a new student. After that, the entire group bowed their heads deeply. Please take care of us, Senior. Li Jun was dumbfounded, thinking to himself, why are they greeting me like a bunch of gangsters meeting their boss? And looking at these kids' faces, are they really 17? There must be some mistake here. The more he thought, the more his head hurt. He finally spoke up. From now on, you don't need to greet me like this. But this only made the kids even more anxious. Did we do something wrong? Li Jun had no choice but to sigh and say frankly, honestly, who am I to receive such a formal greeting from you guys? I'm not a gangster. The new students immediately bowed low again to apologize, making Li Jun flustered as he yelled, I told you to stop doing that! After escaping the mob-style welcome in the lobby, Li Jun finally dragged himself to his classroom. He let out a weary sigh. The new students had even escorted him all the way to the classroom door. Only then did they say their goodbyes and retreat. His master, standing beside him, stroked his beard and chuckled. This, too, is a trial for the strong. Li Jun was speechless with irritation, but that wasn't the end of it. On top of all these great changes, Li Jun's life was also plagued by a few disasters. The moment he sat down at his desk, a confident classmate strode up to him. Spar with me. Li Jun, completely fed up, said, I'm tired, just go home. But that guy wouldn't take no for an answer. He suddenly drew his sword and charged, demanding a duel right in the middle of class, regardless of whether Li Jun agreed or not. In the instant the blade came down, Li Jun reached up and effortlessly snapped the sword into pieces as if he were crushing a weed. The aggressive young man was instantly silenced, his face turning pale. Li Jun quietly clenched his fist, unleashing a massive surge of energy. A moment later, the classmate fainted on the spot. Li Jun snorted coldly. You should try listening to people every once in a while. His master, standing beside him, chuckled gleefully. Well, you're certainly getting popular, aren't you? Li Jun replied wearily. You call this popular? And so his peaceful days were over. One person after another showed up every single day, demanding to duel Li Jun. Every few minutes, someone else would jump in, driving him insane. His head was spinning so much he found himself lamenting, "I'd rather take on 10 monsters than deal with these childish fights." His master stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Perhaps they're just skeptical of your abilities, since they've never seen it for themselves." Li Jun sighed wearily. "Even so, this has already spread way too far." Just then, the classroom door flew open with a deafening shout. "Settle down!" Who was messing around during this morning's assembly? The homeroom teacher, Kim Tae-hyung, stormed in. His eyes swept across the room before landing menacingly on Li Jun, looking like he wanted to eat him alive on the spot. Li Jun just sighed, not even bothering with his glare. Kim Tae-hyung quickly composed himself into the serious teacher he was, went to the podium, and started handing out the class schedules. He then had the students fill them out for collection. His master curiously glanced at the paper in Li Jun's hand and asked, "Is this how you normally attend school?" Li Jun answered nonchalantly, "Usually I focus on just 3 main subjects: footwork, weapon arts, and light body arts. Focusing on just one martial art is difficult enough, but learning a new one is even harder." His master asked again, "So what's your plan?" Li Jun remained silent. As the other students turned in their forms one by one, Li Jun approached the class president, Press, handed her the schedule, and asked, "I can just give this to you, right?" Press replied flatly, "Just give it to me." After handing it in, Li Jun turned and left the classroom, leaving a curious Press to sneak a peek at the schedule she'd just received. One glance and her eyes nearly popped out of her head. On Li Jun's form, not a single box was left unchecked. He had signed up for nearly every class. The first period was held outdoors on the soccer field. The female instructor in charge scanned the field. She thought to herself, "Wow, there seem to be a lot of students this year." Her gaze passed over to the male students, where Li Jun stood at the very front of the line. Out of courtesy, she bowed her head in greeting. Li Jun gave a slight nod in return. Of course, he recognized her. Cha Kyung-jin, a teacher from a high-ranking family known for its neutral stance. Li Jun smiled faintly. He knew she respected everyone, even outcasts like him, treating them like family. Cha Kyung-jin began. "The martial art you are about to learn is the 10 divine palms. It is a technique derived from the 100 divine palms. The Divine Dragon Temple itself gifted this martial art to our school." She signaled to a student beside her. "We'll start with the basics." The student brought out a box and placed it on a table. Inside were round orbs of an unknown purpose. Cha Kyung-jin explained, "All of you, put one of these 20-kilogram iron bracers on each of your wrists." The students eagerly complied, joking around as they put them on. "They said this class would be tough, but this is nothing." Only Li Jun felt a secret sense of relief. He never expected that carrying that 50-kilogram bracer just as his master had told him to, and would actually pay off like this. You really never know what life will throw at you. Cha Kyung-jin continued her instructions. "Now, we will officially begin." She had a student demonstrate. "Everyone, get into a horse stance just like this student here. Now raise both arms, and you are not to use any internal energy." Another student raised their hand. "How long do we have to hold this pose?" Kyung-jin gave a faint smile. "Until the end of class, of course." And so, in the middle of the soccer field, the entire class began to hold the horse stance. Time ticked by silently. 40 minutes, then an hour. The group had already dwindled by half. Then came the 2-hour mark. Only Li Jun was left, standing perfectly still in the middle of the field without a single tremor. The students on the sidelines were buzzing. How much longer can he possibly last? Is he even human? He's not even trembling. Naturally, this made Kyung-jin see Li Jun in a completely new light. She watched him silently, thinking to herself, "This kid, you can't defeat young Master Li Jihong with just tricks." Finally, Kyung-jin signaled the end of class. She walked over to Li Jun and said, "That's enough." Li Jun stood tall and answered calmly, "But there's still time before class is over." Kyung-jin smiled faintly and said softly, "I don't think we need to go that far." Cha Kyung-jin gently held out her hand, and a disciple standing nearby immediately presented a carefully wrapped book. She turned to Li Jun, her eyes pensive yet filled with trust, and said, "From this moment on, I will teach you the 10 divine palms." Those words left Li Jun stunned, unable to hide his astonishment. Cha Kyung-jin handed him the precious secret manual, her voice gentle yet full of weight. "This is the secret martial arts manual for the 10 divine palms. It's an improved version." but it's still a very difficult martial art, you know. An immense joy erupted in Li Jun's heart. He never expected to get his hands on this book so quickly. Kyung Jin patiently explained further. This isn't a secret manual from the underground vault, so it's not an orthodox text in the martial arts system. You must learn exactly what is written in the book, okay? Li Jun quickly flipped through the pages, just glancing at them. Kyung Jin reminded him, her gaze stern yet warm. You must be truly determined. Before she could finish her warning, Li Jun suddenly clenched his fists, took a stance, and channeled the new energy he had accumulated in his body. Clearly unable to wait another second to test it out, he immediately swung his arm and unleashed a 10 divine palms strike. That moment left Kyung Jin frozen in place as the energy Li Jun had just released shot past right beside her. It was so precise that she couldn't help but acknowledge it was the exact technique described in the secret manual. How could Li Jun perform it after just flipping through it once? Li Jun scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. How embarrassing. But then, the training system screen immediately displayed a notification. You have failed to learn the 10 divine palms. His master, standing nearby, chuckled and reminded him, This isn't something you can learn in just one try. Li Jun pouted and retorted, A few more tries and I'll get it. While Li Jun diligently studied the martial forms again, his master watched in silence. This was the first time he realized just how stubborn this student of his was. To think that someone who was once looked down upon would now reveal an ability that surpassed all expectations. The master fanned himself with a paper fan, a glint of anticipation in his eyes. I thought he was just an idiot. Turns out this kid's talent is becoming more and more outstanding. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this little rascal will develop in the future. Even Kyung Jin couldn't hide her shock. Li Jun didn't have the demonic physique that allows for easy absorption of martial arts, nor was he a genius with the heavenly general physique. So how could he possibly transform from a failure and into a genius like this? Li Jun suddenly spoke up, interrupting her train of thought. I accidentally used internal energy, and my training progress vanished into thin air. That means the key point of the 10 divine palms is controlling internal energy, isn't it? Cha Kyung Jin hesitated for a moment, then nodded in acknowledgement. That's exactly right. That's why you have to control your internal energy very well. Just that question alone was enough to shock Kyung Jin even more. He had just read through the manual, yet Li Jun had already seen through to the essence of the martial art within. Without further hesitation, Li Jun tried again. He slowly got into position, each textbook-perfect movement deliberate as he carefully channeled his internal energy, controlling it bit by bit according to the principles. Then, he unleashed an extremely powerful palm strike, the exact technique recorded in the 10 Divine Palms manual. This time, Kyung Jin could no longer maintain her composure. Her jaw dropped as she exclaimed, "That's impossible!" As for Li Jun, he just smiled brightly and cheered in happiness. "I did it!" The training system immediately displayed a confirmation message. Li Jun has successfully learned the 10 Divine Palms. This martial art now became a general skill in his skill inventory. Thanks to his outstanding performance, Li Jun was honored and even invited by the school's instructors to a special internal meeting. That meeting quickly turned into a literal tug-of-war over a talented student. Li Jun, getting a headache, tried to make his case. "Professors, could you please ask one at a time?" But an instructor immediately spoke up excitedly. "I'll go first. In my opinion, you were born to wield a spear. The striking power, the angle of your grip, the precise thrust and retraction. Your body moves as fluidly as flowing water. It's all instinct for you. This spearmanship belongs to the Spear Saint clan." Before he could finish, the swordsmanship instructor pushed him aside and declared loudly, "He's better suited for the sword." This professor described in detail, "Your swordsmanship can already be compared to the dragon sword. Why don't you join my blood sword clan?" But before he could finish, the demonic pharmacy instructor immediately jumped in and cut him off. "No, no! It's best for Li Jun to learn demonic pharmacy arts. His performance proved it all. The Myriad Poisons clan will always welcome you." Right after that, the three instructors erupted into a loud argument, fighting over the right to recruit Li Jun into their respective clans. Amidst the chaotic scene, Li Jun was just overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He quietly slipped away, leaving the three of them to continue their fierce debate. He followed a worn path to the mountain behind the school. He flopped down on the lush green grass, letting out a frustrated sigh. "I'm not even thinking about joining another clan. Why do they keep bothering me?" His master was about to offer some words of wisdom when Li Jun quickly cut him off. You're going to say this is a challenge that the strong must face, right? Getting cut off mid-sentence. The master was fuming with frustration while Li Jun just chuckled in amusement. Suddenly, someone else arrived. It was his teacher, Cha Kyung-jin. Li Jun quickly sat up and gave a sheepish smile. I was just taking a little break to hide from the other teachers. Kyung-jin smiled gently, handed him a can of Coke, and asked, Are you enjoying your classes? Li Jun happily took the can from the professor, nodded, and said, The classes are great. I learn something new every time. Cha Kyung-jin sat down beside him, her gaze gentle as she asked another question. Aren't you tired? You look like you could practice 10 sets of divine palm strikes on your own. Li Jun took a sip of the cold Coke and replied with a smile, I'm not tired at all. For someone like me who didn't inherit a bloodline, just being able to learn martial arts at school is a precious opportunity. It's 100 times better than not being able to learn anything at all. His words left Kyung-jin speechless for a few seconds, her eyes fixed on the young student before her. Just then, a commotion of voices rang out. The 3 professors who had been fighting over the top student earlier had found him. Li Jun could only sigh in annoyance, muttering, They followed me all the way here? Seriously? He immediately stood up and bowed politely. Professor, I'll be going now. Helpless, Cha Kyung-jin could only give him a small wave goodbye. Li Jun, living a second life after having gone through such a dark and gloomy time. And yet now, he was able to enjoy a peaceful blue sky, something that had seemed so distant in the past. Ever since upgrading his martial arts, Li Jun often went to the 6 gates to train. He came here not only to challenge himself, but also to slay beasts to increase his power stats. Every monster that fell at Li Jun's hands had its life force drained and converted into his internal energy. Just like that, the dried-up corpses of fox monsters littered the 6 gates. The training system continuously displayed notifications. Li Jun gained a small amount of magic power along with bonus stats. Li Jun thought to himself, even the boss monster, the blue fox, has been defeated. But luckily, the other monsters continue to multiply. Thanks to that, he could return frequently to train and improve his stats. Even so, Li Jun understood that the rewards from these fox monsters had become too small. Since defeating the blue fox for the first time, he hadn't received another mana stone. He turned to his master and asked, Shouldn't I have gotten a mana stone by now? The master snapped his paper fan shut, pondered for a moment, and then suggested, I've changed my mind. Since you're developing faster than I expected, let's make a big bet. Li Jun was a bit taken aback, not quite understanding what his master meant. The master continued leisurely, The chaotic energy of the barrier is still floating in the air. Aren't you curious? Well, what would happen if you used the blood art magic technique to absorb it? Hearing this, Li Jun asked in shock, You can absorb that stuff? One had to know the magical energy radiating from the barrier was abundant. If it could be absorbed, it would be a panacea for all ailments. The master stroked his beard and chuckled. If you only use the blood art magic technique, it probably won't work. But don't you also have the divine art of chaos? It's worth a try. But then the master added a cryptic reminder. The problem is, your body is already saturated with energy. You've already used up a lot. If you absorb such a massive amount of energy now, there's a 90% chance you'll fall ill. But you still want to try, don't you? Li Jun hesitated, but only for a moment, because right after that, the young man broke into an excited grin, which served as his decisive answer. Li Jun walked straight to a nexus point to begin the process of absorbing the magical energy. He knew full well that if he were the type to give up easily, he wouldn't have made it this far. The training system chimed incessantly with the latest notifications. Li Jun has gained a small amount of magic power through the blood art magic technique. Then came the notification, blood art magic technique has reached 4 stars. Divine art of chaos has also reached 4 stars. Along with that, his stamina, physical strength, power, agility, and willpower stats had reached their maximum levels. In that space thick with magic, Li Jun remained immersed in absorbing every ray of magical energy from the barrier, persistent, enduring, and full of ambition. His whole body tensed, resiliently withstanding the violent waves of chaotic energy. The master stood beside him, his sharp eyes following Li Jun's every move, thinking to himself, Since this is his first time using the divine art of chaos, I'm not sure if this kid will fall into a state of unconsciousness. But it was clear he had overcome the first hurdle. Suddenly, Li Jun's eyes flew open, his pupils glowing, a fierce aura swirling within them. Immediately after, his body felt exhausted, all his energy completely drained. Li Jun collapsed to the ground, lying there panting heavily. The master cautiously approached, leaned down, and asked in a half-teasing, half-sincere tone, "How is it?" Li Jun, barely able to breathe, managed to reply, "I feel like I just came back from the dead." The old master gave a faint smile, crossed his arms, and said, "Hearing you say that, I guess you handled it." Just as he said, a satisfied smile spread across Li Jun's face. The training system screen was still brightly lit before his eyes, covered with an endless stream of notifications. Even though he tried to delete them, the notifications kept piling up like a mountain. Suddenly, a strange notification caught Li Jun's eye. The system informed him that he had absorbed all the magic power radiating from the barrier. At the same time, he received the first clear reward for the barrier, 250,000 accumulated points. But it didn't stop there. Li Jun also officially became the new master of the cunning fox's lair, replacing the blue fox monster. Jun was stunned, unable to believe it. A human becoming the master of this barrier? This was so beyond common sense that he couldn't help but feel bewildered. Humans can become masters of a barrier? Just then a strange sound from behind startled him. Jun cautiously spun around and asked quickly, "Master, was that you who made that sound?" His master snapped irritably. "What do you take your master for, huh?" Li Jun's gaze immediately shifted behind him, where a small creature had appeared. Its brilliant blue fur was dazzlingly beautiful in the light the moment he saw it. Li Jun recognized that blue color. It was undoubtedly the direct legacy of the blue fox monster. This little creature was the little blue fox, looking incredibly cute, yet it inherited the DNA of the very being that was once the monster boss of this place. He gently picked the small creature up, a delighted smile on his face. So this must be what the little blue fox privilege meant. Even his master couldn't help but soften at its cuteness. He crossed his arms, squinting as he remarked, "Once it grows up, it'll definitely be a reliable asset. They have up to 10 tails after all." Jun, who was busy cuddling the little blue fox, froze at his master's words. A shiver ran through him. This adorable creature will turn into that, too. His master tilted his head and asked gently, "Aren't you going to name it?" Li Jun pondered for a moment, genuinely stumped for a suitable name. But after just a breath, his mind clicked. The young man beamed at his master. He squinted and suggested playfully, "How about we call it Lamb Lamb?" The name Li Jun just came up with left both his master and the little blue fox speechless. The two just stared at each other, jaws dropped, while Jun was ecstatic, thinking the name Lam Lam was the cutest thing ever, a feeling that, clearly, no one else shared. One look at the little blue fox's helpless expression was enough to see how vehemently it objected. Too bad it couldn't freaking object. His master couldn't be bothered to argue either, waving a hand in resignation. "Fine, call it whatever you want." And so, the little blue fox's fate was officially sealed with the name Lam Lam. He happily held Lam Lam in his arms and asked it gently, "You like this name too, don't you?" Looking at the little blue fox's face, anyone could guess that if it could speak, its first word would definitely be a resounding, "Hell no." The next morning, just as Li Jun woke up, there was an uninvited guest in his dorm room. A female classmate was standing right at his door. He was about to refuse immediately. "I can't go. I have something urgent," the other person insisted. "It'll only take a few minutes." But when he saw her urgent posture and pleading eyes, Li Jun's heart softened. He couldn't bring himself to refuse and finally nodded, agreeing to go with her. Before stepping out of the room, he didn't forget to turn and ask her, "Could you buy me some milk?" At the same time, in the school president's office, Han Min-sung was leisurely wiping the leaves of a decorative plant. Suddenly, the office door burst open and his secretary rushed in, panting as she spoke urgently. "Mr. President, there's a problem." Han Min-sung frowned. "What is it, Secretary Nam?" Still catching her breath, she hurriedly reported, "There's a problem with the barrier in the basement. The cunning fox's lair has been cleared." President Han Min-sung immediately went down to the basement himself. Before his eyes, the ceiling talismans that had once covered the 6 gates were torn to shreds, scattered on the floor. He bent down and picked up a piece, his face unable to hide his shock. Who could have broken the 5 elements formation? The 5 elements formation. The school's pride. An impenetrable forbidden array. Han Min-sung said in a low voice, "I must go see the barrier for myself." He pushed open the doors of the 6 gates. Just a few steps inside, a virtual system screen suddenly appeared before him, coldly announcing, Han Min-sung is not the master of the cunning fox's lair. Entry without the master's permission is forbidden. He froze, frowning to himself. What the hell is this? Someone else has become the master of the barrier? After a moment of silence, he turned to Secretary Nam and ordered sternly, "Find out for me, right now, who cleared this barrier." Time rewinds to the night before. After leaving the cunning fox's lair, Li Jun was still lost in thought. He asked his master, "Don't you think this is enough?" His master replied flatly, "That's not a good option." Li Jun, unwilling to accept it, growled, "But that's the place where I can see Lam Lam often." His master shook his head slightly, reminding him, "My dear student, I can tell you've never raised a pet before. Monsters like to roam free outside." His eyes scanned Li Jun's small room, and then he chuckled softly. "How about next to your bed?" As soon as the words were spoken, Lam Lam's sleek blue tails swiftly curled up at the corner of the bed. It stretched out with a look of pure bliss, clearly loving the bed. Li Jun beamed, saying enthusiastically, "Let's just leave it there, then." The master glanced quietly at his student, his heart stirring. This was one of the rare times he had seen Li Jun so genuinely happy. A moment without sorrow, without his guard up. Originally, after failing to inherit the bloodline, Li Jun was cast out by his family and ridiculed by the world. It was understandable that his heart had sunk into darkness. But unlike others who were suddenly granted power only to self-destruct, Li Jun always kept trying, always maintained a positive spirit. The master couldn't help but admire this kid. At least he was completely different from his first disciple, a person filled with hatred who lived only for revenge. Li Jun, meanwhile, was still engrossed in petting Lam Lam, unable to let go as he soothed it. Not until the little creature closed its eyes and fell asleep did he finally grin and think to himself, "There's just one more thing I need to do." His system alerted him. The meridians containing his internal chi had expanded, allowing his energy and blood to flow perfectly. His strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Li Jun opened his system's information panel, and immediately his entire body froze. His master noticed, tilted his head, and asked, "What's wrong, kiddo?" A panicked Li Jun pointed at the screen, his voice trembling. "What the hell is this?" Before him was an information panel completely different from before. A completely new Li Jun, stronger than ever. The stats for his stamina, strength, and agility on his status window had now skyrocketed. It was enough to stun even him. Normally, an A-rank awakened was already a rare sight, and their maximum stat value only reached the 300 mark. That number belonged to the 5 emperors, the heads of the great clans. And yet, he had now reached that threshold. Li Jun was silent for a long moment, his heart pounding. A true spring only comes when one is worthy, and that had now become a reality. Li Jun was now fully capable of standing on equal footing with the most powerful beings in this world. His master came closer, raising an eyebrow and asking pointedly, "What are you gawking at? Hurry up and spend your accumulated points." Li Jun calmed down after the initial shock. He asked, "I have points available, don't I?" The system screen displayed a staggering number, over 2 million accumulated points, a number enough to make anyone's eyes pop. Li Jun muttered, a cautious glint in his eyes. "More points just means more trouble. Should I max out my martial arts stats?" His master stroked his beard and replied slowly in a calm tone, "Considering your current state, learning the governing steps now would only be a waste." That statement only fueled the intense curiosity in Li Jun's heart. Just how insanely powerful were those governing steps that his master was so adamant against him learning them? Li Jun smirked, thinking to himself, curiosity really does kill the cat. And so he decided to use a familiar trick. He pointed out the window and shouted very naturally, "Master, look over there!" Startled, his master turned to look outside. But there was nothing there. He turned back, frowning, and asked, "What am I supposed to be looking at?" But Li Jun had already seized the golden opportunity, quickly selecting to unlock the governing steps in his system. A series of notifications popped up. Li Jun has comprehended the governing steps. New skill unlocked. Endless spear technique has been set. Li Jun held his breath, his ears turning red. He braced himself to be chewed out by his master, but after waiting for a long time, he heard no scolding words. Unable to stand it, Li Jun took the initiative and asked, "Aren't you going to scold me?" His master suddenly burst out laughing, his voice full of satisfaction. "I knew you'd do that!" The duty of a good teacher is to understand the personality of his foolish student. A bewildered Li Jun asked, "What do you mean by that?" Immediately, a cold notification popped up from the system. Li Jun cannot use the governing steps. Stat requirements not met. His master laughed even harder. He looked delighted as he watched his student fall into the tricky situation. "You just threw your points out the window." Li Jun's face paled. Inside, he just wanted to scream, "No way!" But points spent could not be recovered. Since he'd already committed, he had to see it through. Li Jun could only tell himself that he would continue to work hard to be able to use this technique. Early the next morning, Li Jun woke up groggily and yawned. He felt that he had slept better than usual last night, and it didn't take long to figure out why. Lam, his little pet, had been sleeping next to him all night. It had become the coziest body pillow in the world. As soon as he opened his eyes, Li Jun opened his system to check his stats again, but everything was still the same, without the slightest change. Because he had chosen to unlock the governing steps, Li Jun now had to continue grinding relentlessly to meet the usage requirements, just as his master required. He frowned slightly and muttered, "Thinking back, it feels like I forgot something." As soon as he realized this, Li Jun hurriedly stroked Lam, smiling and cooing, "Sorry, Lam. I'll go get you some food right now. You're still little, so you can probably drink milk, right?" He stood up and groggily dragged his feet outside, but Lam wouldn't let him go alone. It stuck to him, trailing behind him every step of the way. Li Jun smiled, picking Lam up and cuddling it. "You don't want to leave my side, huh? Want to come with me?" He tucked Lam into his shirt. Just as Li Jun was about to step outside, there was an urgent knock on the door. He pressed his eye to the peephole and looked out, wondering to himself, who would come this early in the morning? Outside was a woman with a serious expression. She introduced herself in a flat tone. "I am the union president's secretary." "You're Li Jun, correct?" Li Jun opened the door, his tone still calm. "That's me. What can I do for you?" Secretary Nam announced without beating around the bush. "The president wishes to see you." Li Jun, slightly surprised, asked, "Me?" But he had a good idea why and whispered to his master, "Min Sung probably wants to talk to me about the barrier." "Then why even bother meeting him?" Despite that, faced with Secretary Nam's somewhat pitiful gaze, Li Jun ultimately agreed to go to the president's office. In the president's office, Han Min Sung quietly observed Li Jun from head to toe. His mind was filled with doubt. He looks pretty normal. Did he really break that cunning blue fox's barrier? Beside him, his master, who understood his opponent's every thought, whispered a reminder to Li Jun, "It seems he can't gauge your true abilities." Li Jun gave a slight smirk. He replied to his master in a confident tone, "I won't fall for that again." Before coming here, he had carefully put on the Ring of Origin, ensuring that Min Sung would be completely unable to probe his true power. After a tense silence, Li Jun took the initiative to break the atmosphere. "I heard you wanted to see me, is that right?" Min Sung took a sip of tea, his eyes still sizing me up. He said he called because he was worried I'd get into trouble with Li Jihong. He then set his teacup down and asked probingly, "Is the Fist King still doing well?" Li Jun replied calmly, without flinching, "As a disowned son, I know nothing about my father." His words made Min Sung almost choke on his tea. He coughed a few times and quickly corrected himself. "My apologies. That was thoughtless of me." In the end, Min Sung let him leave the room. He didn't say a single word about the barrier at the Blue Lake lair. As soon as Li Jun left, Secretary Nam couldn't contain his curiosity and spoke up. "What do you think, sir?" Min Sung slowly replied in a tense voice, "I don't know. I can't figure out what kind of person he is." Even Secretary Nam was stunned by that answer. After all, Min Sung was known for being so perceptive. So how could he say something like this now? He shook his head, muttering with tired and surprised eyes, "This is the first time I've ever encountered something like this. I'm still in utter disbelief. Anyway, we need to call GU right away." After the cryptic conversation with Chairman Min Sung, Li Jun returned to his dorm in silence. The first thing he did, of course, was to find Lam. The moment it saw Li Jun, little Lam immediately wagged its tail, eyes squinting with joy as it ran over. The milk he'd left out that morning had been licked clean, not a single drop left. Li Jun poured some more milk into it. He did so with an affectionate smile. Immediately, the system chimed with a notification. Lam's affection has increased by 5 points. Lam's belly was full. Li Jun chuckled softly. He petted Lam Lam's head, and the screen automatically displayed all of Lam Lam's information. However, when he looked at the stats panel, something made Li Jun almost burst out laughing. All its stats were extremely low, and some lines were even completely blank. Li Jun thought to himself, "It's probably because Lam Lam is still too young, so its stats aren't stable yet. It's fine once it grows up. And I'll turn you into a red-grade monster." "Oh, Lam Lam," thinking about this, Li Jun started to worry about Lam Lam's size when it grew up. After all, he had faced an adult Blue Lake before. Just then, Master appeared silently beside Li Jun. His calm voice rang out. "That's not the only problem." Li Jun nodded. He knew full well that a bigger trouble was waiting for him. Han Min-sung had already grown suspicious. He had to be extremely careful. And it wasn't just Min-sung. He also had to be wary of Bi Xian. Bi Xian was the Shen Gong Qi family's best information gatherer. It was thanks to him that the organization had monopolized countless barriers and treasures. If they found out, he would likely be monitored 24/7. Li Jun thought quietly. Right now, he could use his privileges as the master of the Blue Lake lair to avoid being tracked. Master looked at him and asked casually, "Are you thinking about that?" Li Jun sighed. "I'm always thinking about it." That afternoon, Li Jun quietly left the school again, heading for the familiar empty lot behind the mountain. This place would become the new link point to the Blue Lake lair. The system immediately displayed a notification, identifying link path. Suddenly, a spatial rift appeared in midair. Then, a swirling vortex of air coiled to form a huge portal with thousands of energy streams pouring out. Li Jun slowly stepped inside, his expression calm. "Now I don't have to go down to the basement anymore. When Lam Lam gets bigger, I'll bring it here. Bring it." The system displayed a notification. Link successfully established. Not only that, Li Jun also set up another designated point connecting directly to his dorm room. Now he could teleport back to his dorm instantly with a single touch. Standing in front of the glass window, the young man looked at his reflection, his eyes burning brightly. "Now I just need to get stronger." A few days later, Li Jun went about his daily life as usual, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. In reality, he was secretly hiding inside the barrier to train, but the system still hadn't given him a new mission. Li Jun realized it was time to go to a higher-grade barrier. He had already chosen his target, Chloris Cave, which contained a blue-grade barrier and a hidden special treasure called the Firestone. Before his regression, a monster tamer had discovered the Firestone and let a monster eat it. Afterward, that monster, which was originally a weak white grade, suddenly transformed into a blue-grade monster. Li Jun couldn't help but daydream, what if I let Lam Lam eat the Firestone? While he was imagining this brilliant future, a sudden noise in the distance pulled him from his reverie. A new student was entering the classroom. All eyes turned to the girl, Hanjiu, nicknamed Fire Ice. She stopped at the door of Li Jun's classroom. He was also stunned for a few seconds. Hanjiu walked over, stopped in front of Li Jun and asked, "Are you Li Jun?" Li Jun had no idea what was happening. Hanjiu smirked. "I'm sure you already know who I am. I was just assigned to Class 6, too." Li Jun was stunned. Hanjiu was the eldest daughter of the Shen Gong Qi family, who had inherited the martial arts of the Juge clan. She was a B-rank awakened, nicknamed the Ice Flower. He thought, she should have been placed in the aristocratic Class 1. I don't understand why she's now in Class 6 for F-rank students. Hanjiu held out her hand and smiled. "Let's help each other out, okay?" Li Jun, on the other hand, coldly slapped her hand away. "Just leave me alone. I have no interest in making friends." Instantly, he could feel a murderous aura coming from her. It seemed that being rejected made Hanjiu want to deal with him right then and there. Li Jun clutched his head and groaned. Figuring out how to deal with her is going to be such a pain. Seeing this, his master asked curiously, "What are you going to do?" Li Jun replied wearily, "Quan Riong, my half-brother, that bastard has a secret crush on Hanjiu. Why did she have to sit next to me of all people? If he sees this, his eyes will probably bulge with rage and he'll demand to have my head. You already know, don't you? Why are you still whining? Why is she talking to me?" The master pondered, then asked, "What is the power structure here?" Li Jun quickly explained, "This place has 15 noble families, along with the Martial Alliance, the Lotus Sect, the Death God Cult, and the 9 holy sects. Among them, 5 major families control everything. The elder asked again, "The divine arts are the inherited martial arts of the Juge clan, correct?" Li Jun nodded in confirmation. His master pondered for a moment, then muttered one phrase. "Those bastards. Aren't they always scouting for talent?" Li Jun jumped as his master continued. "Unlike the other families, their martial arts are quite weak. That's why the Juge clan focuses solely on recruiting talented individuals. That's what I know. They even brought Hua Bong into this. They probably want to scout you. That's why they want to observe you and gather information." Li Jun was stunned. "So that scary girl is going to stick to me?" The elder shrugged. "You're weaker than her. You'd better find a way to use this to your advantage. In any case, it's not my problem." Li Jun clutched his head and mumbled, "I don't want anything to do with her." The next class went on as usual, but Li Jun's mind was a complete mess. Today, Li Jun's class was starting swordsmanship. From the podium, the professor looked over the students and said in a serious tone, "I'm sure you're all ready for the test. Now we will begin the one-on-one combat practice. Are there any volunteers?" One arm slowly rose. The person who stood up was none other than Hua Bong Hanjiu. The professor smiled with satisfaction. "Hanjiu, who would you like to fight?" Without a second of hesitation, she immediately pointed her finger at Li Jun. "I want to have a match with him." At the training hall, Li Jun and Hanjiu stood facing each other. She sized up her opponent. "Are you well prepared?" Li Jun looked helpless. "Why the hell does she keep taunting me?" he thought, then replied scornfully, "I haven't prepared anything at all." The senior student clasped his hands behind his back. "Are you two ready?" Then, a single word rang out. "Begin." Hanjiu moved like a flash, her hand gripping her sword tightly, her long hair flying in the wind. He was too surprised to react. She vanished! Hanjiu appeared right at his feet, aiming a strike at his thigh. Li Jun was startled. So fast! Her eyes were as sharp as if they could see through the mortal world. Hanjiu quickly launched a strike, but he dodged it by leaning his head back. Li Jun reached out to grab her sword, but she dodged to the side just in time. Hanjiu leaped up and swung her sword at him, but missed. Li Jun channeled his spiritual energy, running it along the blade of his sword, but his eyes never left her for a second. He slashed forcefully towards Hanjiu. A dense spiritual aura emanated from him, filling the room. She wasn't injured. Instead, she launched a counter-strike. It made him wary. She's stronger than I thought. At this rate, I won't be able to hold on. Li Jun clenched his jaw, using his sword to block the deadly blow before him. A spark ignited in his eyes. But it's not like I can't block her. A fierce, evenly matched battle was unfolding. Li Jun focused thousands of rays of spiritual energy into his sword. His eyes flew open. The blue aura in his pupils hadn't faded in the slightest. Li Jun swung his sword. I'll get to witness and experience it firsthand. A strike like that should have been aimed at Hanjiu, but he was focusing the spiritual orb on himself. She was stunned. What the hell? Her mind raced. Did he just identify a few weaknesses in my iron blood sword style and attack them directly? This time, Hanjiu could only defend. How is he so familiar with my attacks? If this keeps up, I'll lose. Their eyes met, the tension in the air as tight as a bowstring. In that case, I'll have to use my trump card to fight back. As if reading her mind, Li Jun said, You're planning on using the Supreme Severing Sword, aren't you? Hanjiu froze for 5 seconds. Huh? The sword in her hand flashed. How did you know? Her eyes widened. Taking advantage of her shock, he darted past her and landed a blow to end the match. The surrounding aura gradually subsided. Li Jun sheathed his sword, considering the test complete. A long moment passed, but Hanjiu just stood there, completely dumbfounded. A lock of her hair fell. The air around them grew thick. Hanjiu's signature long hair had now been clipped short on one side by his blade. Li Jun turned back, noticing she still hadn't moved. After a beat, Hanjiu sheathed her sword. The atmosphere grew heavy. Her fists were clenched as if she were enduring a massive shock. Hanjiu's lips trembled. I lost. A few days later in class, golden sunlight streamed through the window panes. She rested her chin on her hand, gazing outside with a somewhat pensive look. Sitting at the front desk, he turned back to look at the brooding and confused Hanjiu. Li Jun cautiously wondered, She's been like this ever since the sparring match. Was she really that shocked? The elder appeared, chiding him. Why did you cut her hair? What if she's carrying a seal within her? He protested. I already told you it was an accident. He explained. The divine arts and the iron blood sword clans are the only ones who hate them. One day, they will unite to fight against them. Li Jun scratched his head, feeling wary. I have to stay on good terms with them. The sun began to set, replaced by the orange-red glow of dusk. He walked hesitantly through the school grounds. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind. Li Jun! Hanjiu approached with a serious expression that he couldn't help but notice. She started, Are you busy? Li Jun replied, No. Hanjiu started walking. Then have dinner with me. He stammered, Okay. Meanwhile, absurd thoughts ran through his head. What is happening? Why is she suddenly acting so weird? He asked his master worriedly. Do you think she's decided she needs to bury me? The elder teased. Well then, may you rest in peace, my disciple. After class, the two went to a small pizza place as planned. Hanjiu picked up a slice with stringy cheese, with slices of pinkish sausage on it. She cupped her face, savoring the taste. This is so delicious. Li Jun gave a strained smile as he watched her. She sure can eat. His gaze fell to the pizza on the table. Is it really that good? I don't see anything special about it, Hanjiu asked curiously. Why aren't you eating? The question made Li Jun flustered. It's just, I don't even know what this dish is. As she brought the slice to her mouth, Hanjiu asked, Are you mad? He jumped. Huh? Her face darkened. I brought you some good food and you're still pouting? Hearing that, you just froze solid. Hanjiu wiped her mouth. Anyway, I'll get straight to the point. Her eyes landed on his face. How did you manage to defeat me? Li Jun froze on the spot. I just saw your weakness, that's all. Hanjiu asked again. A weakness. He explained about the openings during combat. Your sword is very sharp, but I felt like there was something disconnected. Hearing Li Jun's explanation, it sounded simple. I just aimed for those openings and attacked. Hanjiu was stunned. You mean you figured that out after just a few exchanges? He replied modestly, It was just a coincidence. Li Jun comforted her. I've answered your question, so don't be sad about your hair anymore, okay? But she seemed surprised. My hair? Hanjiu tossed her hair. Why would I be sad? She smiled charmingly. It's a fresh look. I actually like it. Hanjiu explained with relief. I wanted to cut my hair short from the beginning anyway. Meanwhile, that night, a bright crescent moon illuminated every path. A brightly lit pavilion gave off a chillingly eerie vibe to anyone who looked at it. Inside the pavilion, shattered glass was strewn everywhere. Blood slowly spread from one direction. Li Jihong roared in fury. Li Jun, I'll tear you to shreds, you bastard! The old servant said worriedly. Young Master Jihong, please calm down, your hand is bleeding. He turned to look at the servant, tears streaming down his face. So what? Li Jihong went mad, using a shard of glass to slash viciously at the old servant's face. Now that you see I'm weak, you look down on me, huh? He slowly advanced on the unfortunate servant. Because of that stupid piece of broken glass, my body was injured. And you tell me to calm down? My Dantian? A stream of dark red blood trickled from the corners of both his eyes. My Dantian has been shattered into 100 pieces. As his arm was about to slash down, it was caught by a firm hand. Li Jihong froze, his hand still gripping the glass shard tightly, refusing to let go. He stammered as he looked at the person before him. Father! Mingup pried the shard from his hand. Calm down! Li Jihong sobbed uncontrollably and threw himself into the old man's arms. Father! Mingup comforted him. Don't worry. He tightened his grip. Your father will heal your Dantian for you. Mingup dropped a bombshell. I found a cure-all that can help you recover. He asked joyfully, Really? The old man introduced a mystical golden orb. This is called the Fire Stone, a treasure with unbelievable fire-based energy. If you consume it, they say your Dantian will be restored instantly. I will get it for you. Li Jihong buried his face in his father's chest. Thank you, father. Mingup hugged him, but inside he was seething with anger for his son. Li Jun, that useless brat. A father's protectiveness flared up. How dare you? I'll make you regret ever touching my son. Li Jun strolled nonchalantly down the school hallway. He reached the restroom and went inside, but there was something strange about the atmosphere. The restroom door slowly closed. Warm sunbeams pierced through and shone on the ground. The man tailing him whispered over Bluetooth, "He's in the restroom." The other side responded immediately. "Remember to keep an eye on him." He hastily replied, "Roger that." The tail waited and waited, his eyes darting to his watch. He waited for what felt like an eternity, but he didn't see him come out. More than 10 minutes had passed. The tail grew impatient. "He's been in there for 40 minutes. The person on the other end of the line asked, "Stomachache?" He stared at the tightly shut door and fell silent. The tail anxiously ran over. "I have a bad feeling. I'm going in to check." The person on the other end quickly tried to stop him, but it was too late. "What are you doing?" His hand reached the doorknob but paused at the voice coming from the other end. "A shadow guard shouldn't make face-to-face." Suddenly, from inside, Lee Jun pushed the door open forcefully, hitting the tail. He asked, startled, "Are you okay? I didn't know you were standing there." The shadow guard clutched his nose. "I'm fine." Lee Jun asked worriedly, "Really? I have to go to my next class now. Be careful next time, okay?" The person on the other end teased, "I was worrying for nothing," he said, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." The other person hung up. Lee Jun glanced back with a look that seemed to see through everything. "I'll see you later." As he walked away, he grumbled, "That was close. It took more time than I thought." The old master reminded him, "But you achieved your goal, didn't you?" Lee Jun's eyes brightened slightly. "That's right. I bet they never imagined it, huh?" He held up a paper with a price list. "That I escaped the barrier. Sold C-rank monostone, 600,000. Sold E-rank monostone, 500,000. Sold E-rank monostone, 600,000. Sold F-rank monostone, 40,000. Lee Jun looked mysteriously at the monostone with the enormous price tag. "And sold monostone? Sold B-rank monostone, 100 million. He was discussing with the old man about the shadow guards. "Creating a few different designated points beforehand was a good idea. We had to go to at least this length to fool those shadow guards." The old master replied logically, "But do you think doing this is okay?" Lee Jun tucked the paper into his shirt. "What do you mean?" The old master explained. "Those papers you signed to sell the mana stones," he said with a grave look. "You gave the family alliance the right to view them. A contract in black and white appeared like an unchangeable pledge. At the bottom was Lee Jun's signature. Divine Will Family Bank. It seems to be a bank owned by the family. Divine Will." He chuckled. "It's fine. I'd rather confuse them. The sparkling B-rank blue mana stone I sold mostly appears in forest-type barriers. How could a nobody like him get his hands on it? They'll ask themselves something like that." Lee Jun waved his hand dismissively. "Just let them guess." The school cafeteria was bustling with people, filled with cheerful chatter and laughter. He sat alone at an empty table, eating quietly with no one beside him. Seon-ho walked over. "Hey, Jun, is this seat next to you taken?" Lee Jun replied, "No." Suddenly, Hanjiu slammed her food tray down. "It's taken now." Her grim expression terrified Seon-ho's group. I didn't know. Our apologies." Hanjiu sat down as if it were the most natural thing, taking him by surprise. Lee Jun asked cautiously, "Why did you scare them off like that? We could have just eaten together." She replied nonchalantly, "I'm not comfortable with crowds." He got angry and confronted her. "Hey, you! The atmosphere only got uncomfortable because you showed up. Don't you realize that?" Hanjiu replied indifferently. "So what?" Lee Jun froze. "So damn stubborn." He rolled his eyes. "Forget it." She was eating when she suddenly paused, as if remembering why she came here. Just as he was about to take a bite, she asked, "You're Lee Jun, aren't you?" He froze on the spot under her probing gaze. "Have you learned any techniques besides the 3 principles control art?" He turned to her. "Why do you ask?" Hanjiu explained, "With just the 3 principles control art alone, it's impossible for someone to reach that level." Lee Jun closed his eyes. "Is that what you think?" She was about to say more, but he ignored her. "I'm done eating. I'm leaving." Lee Jun walked away, leaving Hanjiu sitting there like an idiot. She turned to watch his retreating back, her eyes deep and unreadable. At the lecture hall, the window panes reflected the gentle autumn sunlight. Taehyung stood on the podium. "We will have our training next week." A student in the class asked, "Where at?" The man introduced the first location. "The location is the Divine Treasury. The second location is the secret octopus with its long, writhing tentacles, then the Sea of Despair, and the final boss is the dangerous creature in Hell's Cave. Taehyung asked, "Where do you all want to go?" The students below began to discuss. "Anywhere is fine." Lee Jun rested his chin on his hand, thinking. This is perfect timing. I'll go to Hell's Cave to train, but how can it be this convenient? He looked straight ahead. Is this really just a coincidence? A cold chill ran down Lee Jun's spine, as if a pair of eyes were staring intently at him. He tried to close his eyes and act unconcerned, but the overwhelming aura kept flooding towards him. Lee Jun spun around in frustration to look at Hanjiu. What? What is it? Do you have something to say? She threw a neatly folded piece of paper towards him. Lee Jun unfolded it. I'm just observing. Ignore me. After reading it, he felt like his lungs were about to explode from her bizarre behavior. This eccentric 4D personality of hers. The schoolyard was now deserted without a single person in sight. When he got home, he sprawled out on his bed. Phew! Lee Jun hugged a pillow and whined, I'm so tired. His expression turned cold. Why are those weirdos so damn persistent? Haisel was all enthusiastic. Hello, Sunbae. You look so cool today. And then there's the eccentric Hanjiu. I'm just observing. Ignore me. How annoying. Whatever. The immortal elder fanned himself. This is all just a part of life for the strong. Lee Jun buried his face in his pillow. Why do you always talk about how the strong have to endure this and that? The old man grumbled. How dare you talk back while your master is speaking? Lee Jun was covering his ears, but suddenly froze with a look of utter confusion. Lee Jun hastily searched around the room. Is it just me, or where did Lam Lam go? The immortal elder also realized it. Huh, you're right. He offered a perfectly reasonable explanation. What if it just crawled into a corner to sleep? The immortal elder floated behind him. That's right. Lam Lam should have come out to greet me by now. He called out its name loudly. Lam Lam! Lee Jun paced back and forth around the room. Lam Lam, where are you? He bent down to look under the bed. Lam Lam. His eyes suddenly shot wide open, his pupils shrinking as worry spread across his face. Lee Jun softly called out to the little six-tailed blue fox cowering in a corner. Lam Lam! It was grimacing, cold sweat pouring down its forehead as if it were enduring something terrible. The bus was parked in the schoolyard, ready for a perilous expedition. The students were chatting and laughing happily, not noticing Lee Jun sitting quietly on a long bench. He was carefully unzipping each zipper to find something in his backpack. Lee Jun smiled gently. Sorry, is it a little cramped? Just bear with it for a bit, okay? Lam Lam's head poked out, its little pink tongue constantly sticking out, looking incredibly cute. Flashback to the previous night. Lam Lam was curled up on the bed, its brow tightly furrowed. The system window showed its status. Basic information. Name, Lam Lam. Growth, Stage 1. Species, Blue Fox. Rarity, Fire attribute. My magic power is weakened. Territory, Blue Fox's lair. Region, Purified. Lee Jun looked at the flashing system window, his heart heavy with unease. He worried, so it's in pain because it's lacking magic power. Lee Jun touched its body. Just a moment, Lam Lam. Suddenly, the immortal elder roared, What do you think you're doing? He explained, I'm just transferring my magic power to Lam Lam. The old man quickly stopped him. Don't do that. If the key from your energy arts goes berserk, it'll be a disaster. Lee Jun is so listless, but what can I do? The old master reassured me that it's not a weak fox, so it can hold out until your training day. Take it to the training location. He stroked Lam Lam's head. Yes. The warm afternoon sun shone on the schoolyard, where a row of buses was lined up perfectly. Back in the present, Lee Jun looked at it playfully, his heart filled with indescribable joy. It's a good thing Master transferred his energy to Lam Lam. It's not as tired as before. He smiled brightly. It'd be great if you're feeling better when we get back to the barrier. Suddenly, Hanjiu appeared out of nowhere, causing Lee Jun to slam his bag shut. What do you want? Lee Jun clutched his chest, panting. You scared the life out of me. What are you doing? Aren't you getting on the bus? Hanjiu explained. I was waiting until I saw you get on. He gave a sarcastic smile. Suit yourself. It was finally time to depart. Lee Jun grabbed his bag and stepped onto the bus. Haisel saw him and shouted with joy, Senior, you're here! He hesitated. You are... He chatted happily. I haven't introduced myself to you yet, have I? Haisel introduced herself. I'm Haisel. I hope you'll look after me during this training session, Senior. Hearing that, Lee Jun seemed thoughtful. Haisel. I feel like I've heard that name somewhere before. He hesitated. Am I misremembering? Then he advised her, Haisel, don't greet me like that next time, okay? As soon as he finished, she bowed deeply again. I'll keep that in mind, sir. It startled Lee Jun. Hey, don't... He moved forward and chose a seat by the window, coincidentally ending up next to Hanjiu. Taehyung checked each row of seats. Is everyone here? Everyone remember to buckle your seatbelts. The guy stared intently at him. Lee Jun, you did well, choosing this hellhole. This makes things much more convenient for me. Taehyung's eyes were filled with hatred. This time, I'm going to take care of you properly. Below the bridge, the clear, pristine blue water reflected the sky. In a corner somewhere, a rich stream of spiritual energy gathered into a small vortex. Minzi stepped out with a solemn expression. Welcome, everyone. I am Kang Minzi, captain of Squad 3. I am a member of the Divine Clan's war faction. Today, I will be your guide. As long as you follow our instructions, there won't be any problems beyond this gate. Lee Jun stuck his hands in his pockets. The war faction. His gaze was distant. The war faction is a top-tier legion with members who are C-rank awakened or higher. Having them act as guides for a field trip is a bit over the top, don't you think? The spiritual energy from his thoughts gradually thickened. Are they here to kill me? Or is it because they know the location of the Firestone? Or it could be both. Lee Jun looked up, as if sensing a murderous aura. Minzi, wearing dark sunglasses, solemnly led the group of students on the exploration. Someone suggested, Captain, let's start slowly. He replied, All right, let's go. Standing in the back, he smirked. They're not even putting on a polite act. Truly a very professional clan. But Lee Jun's expression suddenly darkened. It's only now that they're acting this way. Even if I were to kill someone here, you wouldn't be able to call for help. From a distance, Hanjiu dropped to one knee, as if being crushed by an immense force. She turned, her hand already gripping her sword, ready for battle. Hanjiu looked towards the blue light emanating from around him. She froze for 5 seconds. What is that? Hanjiu stared, frozen, at Lee Jun's expression. That bloodthirsty look? What's with that? Inside the cave, it was pitch black, lit only by blue fireflies. The group advanced slowly, no one daring to make a rash move. Minzi raised his hand, stopping them. Halt! He explained, seemingly knowledgeable. From this point on is an unexplored area. It's a bit of a shame, but you will only be allowed to tour the explored areas. As he finished, someone whispered, He said it's an unexplored area. An adventurous type spoke up. I wonder what's in there. I'm so curious. I'll have to come back here again someday. Taehyung broke the slightly awkward atmosphere. This isn't a place these kids can easily come back to. How about we let them look around for a bit? Minzi scratched his chin. Then let's regroup here. Suddenly, Hanjiu interjected. I really think we should wait. She raised her hand to speak. We should only look around the safe areas. This is a training session, after all. Hearing this, the guy gritted his teeth. He fumed internally. Why does she have to do that? Just try and see what happens. Taehyung didn't know how to react to Hanjiu's words. Lee Jun raised an eyebrow, amused. I think this will be interesting. She stammered. He gave a faint smile. It's what everyone wants. A little bit should be fine. The war faction is here, after all. Minzi pointed towards the cave. All right, then. We'll go with the majority. Now let's move out. A group of goblins sat in the cave, unaware of the approaching danger. He emerged from a dark aura behind one of them. It sensed a human presence, but it was too late to turn around. Minzi slashed the goblin's carotid artery. It fell with a blood-splattered face, alerting the goblin next to it. Seeing its comrade die, it flew into a rage and charged straight out. Thousands of sharp blades materialized in midair, then flew straight into the goblin's neck, causing it to let out a horrific scream. Minzi calmly wiped his blade. Well then, shall we head back? The students were stunned. Is it over? But we haven't seen anything yet. He cut them off. Even if we go deeper, we won't find anything. There's no boss monster here. That's why I was able to get this far. Minzy looked down at the two unfortunate goblins, his expression unchanging. Suddenly, the ground began to shake violently, making everyone stagger. The student screamed, "Earthquake!" He looked worried and signaled for a quick retreat. "This isn't an earthquake, this is—" One by one, they pushed and shoved their way out of the cave. It was a wave. Hanjiu scrambled out of the cave with the other students. But she didn't forget to look back. She gasped and cried out, "Lee Jun!" Worried, Hanjiu rushed back towards him. "Why are you just standing there?" Suddenly, an arm wrapped around her waist, stopping her from moving forward. The teacher, acting all righteous, said, "You can't. It's too dangerous." Hanjiu struggled. "What are you doing, sir? Let me go!" Hiseo also rushed forward. "Senior!" Just as his hand was about to reach him, a strange light appeared in front of them. "Lee Jun Sr.!" A massive boulder fell from out of nowhere. "It's dangerous!" But he just stood there, completely still, like a puppet waiting for its strings to be pulled. That man smirked with satisfaction as he looked ahead. Hiseo frowned, clenching his jaw as if he had just missed something important. He slowly raised his hand to touch the boulder, his helplessness evident in every move that followed. Hiseo dropped to his knees. A cold aura surrounded him, making the stone wall seem even more solid. He pounded on the rock repeatedly. "Senior, Senior, are you all right?" Lee Jun replied calmly from within. "I'm not dead yet. Stop shouting." Hiseo sighed in relief. "Thank goodness. Captain Lee Jun is trapped." Minzy patted his shoulder reassuringly. "I'm not sure if another boulder will fall. We should go back to where we started for now. He'll be safe for a while. There are no signs of monsters nearby. We'll come back after we figure out a way to help him." Hiseo, helpless, had no choice but to accept reality. "Okay." Beside him, Hanjiu came to her senses and broke free from the teacher's grasp. She said in a strained voice, "Lee Jun, don't you go anywhere. Just wait there patiently, okay?" He sounded completely unconcerned. "I know. Now hurry up and go." Lee Jun listened to every sound outside the boulder to confirm it was safe. He crossed his arms. "Lam Lam, you can come out now." Lam Lam stretched its body, making Lee Jun marvel. "You little rascal. You've been full of life ever since we were in that barrier." He placed it on his shoulder. "Shall we go?" A group of goblins sat huddled together as if discussing something. Suddenly, one of them spotted a figure and growled warily. They jeered, discussing the most brutal ways to cook a human. Then, one goblin charged forward, its mouth wide open as if it had been waiting for this prey for a long time. But it suddenly stopped, cold sweat pouring down its forehead, its face filled with terror. At the same time, the system announced, "Innate skill. Fear has been activated." The goblin collapsed to the ground, its red eyes turning ghostly white like a chameleon's. Terrified, they all fled. But Lee Jun paid them no mind. The deeper he went, the more the system announced. "Lam Lam's affinity for you has increased by 20 points. Lam Lam has absorbed low-grade demonic energy. By meeting the compatibility requirements, Lam Lam has learned the innate skill, demonic energy. Lam Lam has learned the skill, devour." He smiled as it nuzzled its head against his neck. "You finally learned your first skill." Lam Lam had not only recovered, but had also grown much stronger. Demonic energy, D-rank growth type. Description: absorbs demonic energy scattered in the air to regenerate demonic energy. As in a purer form, high-grade demonic energy allows for the release of highly concentrated energy. Effect: generates demonic energy. Devour. SSS-Rank. Description: the quality of the demonic energy does not affect Lam Lam's appetite. Effect: absorbs demonic energy. Lee Jun looked at the system window, a bit surprised. "This is—" he wondered. "It seems similar to the blood-sucking arts, doesn't it?" The elder appeared. "I suppose so. Like master, like servant. It's a divine beast after all, isn't it?" The elder looked melancholic. "I just don't think it should turn into a human." He was completely exasperated. "Hey, am I even your disciple?" Suddenly, Lee Jun's gaze fell upon something on the ground. A golden spiritual aura enveloped a meteorite, illuminating the long path ahead. The firestone didn't seem to be intact, but it still radiated a dense spiritual energy. Lee Jun slowly approached and gently picked up the firestone. He marveled at its mysterious appearance. "So this is a firestone." The system window appeared. "You have obtained a firestone. Do you wish to use it? Yes/no. Li Jun, of course, couldn't pass up this God-given opportunity. Yes, use it. The elder floated beside him. I sense an incarnation is about to appear. He just praised him. As expected of my master, you know everything. Li Jun carefully searched for a path into the cave. Lam Lam's blue light acted like a protective layer for the two of them. He gently pushed a boulder that looked no different from the others. It didn't budge an inch, so he pressed the firestone against it. The system announced again, you have found Secret Chamber 7 in the Hell Cave. You have received 250,000 P for discovering a top-secret dungeon. Along with that, the stones crumbled away, revealing a strange new path. The system chimed, you have entered Secret Chamber 7 in the Hell Cave. At the same time, at the cave entrance, a blue light enveloped the students. Hanjiu demanded, why can't I go with you? I have to go save Li Jun, Minzi tried to explain. Hanjiu, you are the esteemed lady of the divine clan. If something happens to you, your clan will be in trouble too. She was still being stubborn, but that teacher quickly yelled, stop it! Taehyung reassured her, if anything happens to you, the chairman won't let us off the hook. Just leave this to the assault team, all right? Hanjiu gritted her teeth anxiously. Something's really strange. I have a bad feeling about this. She stared at his face and the guards. Those guys aren't here to help Li Jun. Li Jun walked right into a trap by himself again. This situation, could it be some kind of conspiracy? Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of Taehyung, startling him. The system also appeared to notify Hanjiu, and Minjae saw the system window as well. But his expression was very calm. And it wasn't just the three of them. Everyone could see the system announcement. She was confused. What is going on? On the system screen was a notification. The Zone 6 barrier has been upgraded to a blue zone barrier. Summon is furious because it thinks someone has broken into its master's home. Summon, attack +20, speed +30. The students were shocked. A teleportation barrier? In the pitch-dark cave, a lone figure stood so still you could hear a pin drop. Thousands of Sukmans stood in rows, drawing their bows, ready to fire at Li Jun. They loosed fiery red arrows, but he remained perfectly calm. Li Jun swiftly used a divine art to block the incoming arrows, dodging them skillfully. He glanced to the side and saw one trying to ambush him. A Sukman on horseback, holding a flaming spear, charged straight at him. It swung its spear, but it was blocked by Li's spiritual energy. Jun's sharp spiritual's energy sliced across the Sukmun's head, sending blood flying. He swept his arm, decapitating every last one of them, then made a perfect landing. The surrounding aura grew more menacing. System notifications flooded in. You have defeated Sukman Spearman. You have defeated Speed Sukman. You have defeated Speed Sukman. Li Jun looked at the system window, dejected. It's still not over? I was just trying to finish the quest I couldn't clear last time. He looked up at the millions of lurking Sukman. Oh well, if there's a silver lining, then this is the perfect opportunity for training. There's no limit to how many times I can clear this place, right? It gave a booming order. There's a human! Charge! Tear him to shreds and offer him to the Lord! Li Jun raised an eyebrow. You must be the commander. Millions of Sukmun stared at him with hungry eyes. He slammed a palm into the middle of its head, crushing it completely. Li Jun swung his arm. He unleashed an incredible amount of spiritual energy that decapitated nearly half of them. As for the rest, he flew towards them, tearing them apart one by one. The further Li Jun advanced, the more he killed. This made the leader of the Sukmun anxious. He's getting closer, isn't he? They roared in desperation. We have to kill him at all costs! The Sukman's eyes glinted with killing intent. It narrowed its eyes, having met a formidable opponent. It swung its blade down at his feet. But thankfully, he leaped into the air to dodge it. The Sukman growled, but the cold sweat on its brow betrayed its fear. Li Jun suddenly appeared right behind it, his killing intent pouring out like a waterfall. He kicked it squarely in the back of the neck, sending its head flying like a stuffed animal launched into space. The head rolled across the stone floor, making a chilling sound. Its once fiery eyes were now just a dark, empty void of death. The massive foot of the Sukman Lord stepped forward and crushed the head. It looked at Li Jun, its eyes filled with curiosity and amusement. The shadow of the Sukmun Lord loomed over him. Well, this is a surprise. It hefted a greatsword onto its shoulder. You're telling me the one who trespassed on my territory is a mere human? Meanwhile, outside the cave, the students had left the barrier. The other students are all out. Minjai, with his hands in his pockets. Thanks to the barrier's fluctuations, I didn't have to teleport myself. The barrier has already upgraded to a blue zone. The search party must be close to the Firestone. The system in front of him also announced, barrier has been upgraded to a blue zone. Minjai smirked. Let's just find Li Jun's body and go back. Inside the cave, the Sukmun Lord was still questioning him. You're telling me the one who invaded my domain is just a lowly human? Li Jun looked up at it. You're the blue-grade monster boss of this dungeon, aren't you? You look pretty ridiculous. A boar's head on a human body. The Sukmun Lord and he stood face to face, neither backing down. It roared, I'll rip out your tongue and chew it to pieces, you human! Li Jun emitted a dense spiritual energy, raising his fists into a fighting stance, but suddenly his eyes widened, his face filled with fear. Lam Lam shot out like a bullet to protect its master. Lam Lam! Li Jun screamed as he saw the Lord swing his sword down. Danger! A blue flame erupted in Lam Lam's eyes, making it look even more magnificent. The system chimed. Lam Lam has used the skill, Rend. It opened its small mouth, seemingly wanting to devour the Sukmun Lord. It stumbled. This pathetic little monster dares. The Sukmun Lord roared in fury. Who do you think you are? Then, with a look of utter despair, I can't die like this. The Lord's entire body collapsed onto the stone floor as warm blood gushed from its carotid artery. Li Jun watched, feeling helpless. I was so determined, and this is how it ends. He turned and exclaimed, Aside from that, I'm really surprised. I never expected you to suddenly have an outburst like that. He remembered his own instructions. I'll finish things up and be right back. You rest here, okay? He then started to scold it. I told you to stay somewhere safe and rest. Li Jun hugged it. Don't do that again next time, okay? He placed Lam Lam on his shoulder. Anyway, I didn't know that. The monster can use that maul skill, too. The system was flooded with notifications. You have single-handedly defeated a high-level monster boss. Reward. You have received 1 million accumulation points. The barrier has been broken. You have received 500,000 accumulation points. Main Quest 2, the Hermit's training, has been completed. You have received 650,000 accumulation points. Li Jun was surprised. The rewards are no joke. Suddenly his eyes darted from side to side as if he had discovered something. Li Jun looked down at the overlord creature lying sprawled in a pool of blood. He bent down and picked up a book from its body. This is a book that looks brand new. The Karma King's Technique. The book holds a profound secret. The Karma King's Technique is the foundation of the royal art, the control art that my father, the Finger King of the Divine Clan, only she could master. He seemed to know a little about this mysterious book. The two words karma in front mean that this level is even higher than the highest realm of the control art. Li Jun's hand, holding the book, trembled slightly. But for a martial art derived from that control art, to appear here? He tucked the book into his robes with a thoughtful expression. If given the chance, I would definitely burn this technique to ashes. That way, the Finger King would never be able to obtain it. But the old immortal wondered, Aren't you going to use it? Li Jun gently closed his eyes. I don't know if it's because I've had to endure so much under the Marshall family's roof or not, but I truly have no interest in it at all. He smiled slyly. It's better not to use it than to bring more shame to the family name. The system cut through his train of thought. The owner of Hell's 7th crypt no longer exists. Do you want to mark this place as your territory? Li Jun tapped the system panel. Why even ask such an obvious question? Another notification appeared. Hell's 7th crypt has become Lam Lam's territory. He hesitated. Are we almost done here? I almost forgot something important. Li Jun gave an order. Lam Lam, bring me the mana stone. Lam Lam held the fire stone in its mouth. Good boy. Bring it here. But it wouldn't take a single step closer to him, just standing frozen in place. Li Jun forced a smile. Lam Lam? Lam Lam looked up, staring intently at him. A system notification rang out. Lam Lam has used Ravage. Li Jun's eyes widened, his face filled with horror. No! A streak of fresh blood stained the rock. Minjay's voice rang out. All right, so the firestone that was supposed to be here is gone. He clenched his fist, demanding answers. And Li Jun has entered the dungeon. The crypt? His teammate replied. Yes, Its exact location is still marked on the map, but it seems Li Jun has already taken the Firestone. Minjae's face contorted. Damn it, how did that little brat get here? Impossible. How did he even find this place to begin with? Suddenly, his gaze dropped to the notification panel. A beam of light illuminated the entire space. The upgraded barrier has shifted to the blue zone. The shadow assassin stammered, "This is—" Li Jun slowly stepped out from the light. "What the hell is this? Why is everyone gathered here?" The man froze. Li Jun raised an eyebrow, challenging him. "And what brings you fine gentlemen here?" The members of Minjae's squad tried to question him. "You're still alive? Does that mean you killed the monster boss? Did you consume the Firestone?" Li Jun remained calm. "And what if I did?" The man ground his teeth at his cavalier attitude. "How dare a failure like you? When did you find out about it?" Cold sweat started to trickle down Minjae's forehead. This is getting complicated. Lee Min-hyub had repeatedly instructed him to bring back the Firestone. He stared at the seemingly harmless student before him, even if he did consume the Firestone. It should take some time to fully absorb something that incredible. I have to kill Li Jun. At the very least, I must bring back his blood. A powerful force, like a boulder, pressed down on Minjae. The entire group of shadow assassins was startled by the sudden tremor. Li Jun stood in the middle of a swirling vortex of spiritual energy, his expression unchanged. Minjae was terrified. Just by consuming the Firestone, there's no way he could become this strong. He signaled his teammates to retreat. Suddenly, Li Jun burst out laughing, causing the entire group to freeze. Wiping a non-existent tear from the corner of his eye, Li Jun said, "Why would you think I'd reveal my true power?" A system notification rang out. "The owner of Hell's 7th crypt has sealed the barrier." Minjae was horrified. But isn't the monster boss dead? Standing above them, he created an invisible pressure. "From now on, none of you are allowed to take a single step out of this gate." The water below his feet rippled and shimmered, looking strangely peaceful. A group of students gathered in a line before the glowing barrier. Hisel shifted back and forth nervously, while Hanjiu's face remained cold. She said irritably, "Can you stand still?" "You're getting on my nerves." He flinched. "Ah, my apologies." Hanjiu stared at the chains wrapped around the barrier. "This is a good chance to probe Li Jun's abilities. Not bad." She mused as thousands of thoughts rushed through her mind. To grasp his abilities, I've been following him all day but found nothing. He's too strong. He defeated the tyrant, Li Jihong, and even stood against Master Byung-ah during the evaluation. And he's also the one who defeated me. Hanjiu deduced that most likely means he's still hiding his true strength. She was certain. He'll definitely make it out alive, and prove that I wasn't wrong. Just as she finished her thought, the chains around the barrier slammed against each other and then burst apart, shattering into pieces as if struck by a powerful force from within. Those nosy students, the barrier is finally opening. Streams of spiritual energy flowed out, and with them, an object from within the barrier was carried out by the momentum. A single drop of hot blood dripped to the ground. A bad omen. Li Jun collapsed to the ground as if completely exhausted, startling the students. Hanjiu grabbed his shoulder. "Look at me." "Are you okay?" Her eyes widened. "This person." Hanjiu screamed when she saw the spreading bloodstain on Li Jun's side. "Li Jun!" The crowd was buzzing with discussion. "How long has it been?" They estimated about 3 hours have passed. The MC seemed restless. "That's quite a while. I wonder if it's because the Shinji clan's Rung Ren squad just went in." The cameraman glanced over. "Is that so?" The commentator explained, "Normally the fluctuation only lasts for about 15 minutes, even though many people finish before that deadline." The cameraman exclaimed, "That squad is amazing!" The MC waved his hand dismissively. "Forget it." Suddenly, the MC's eyes widened. "All right, cameras ready." The barrier erupted in a blinding light. "The barrier has been broken." But then he frowned in confusion. "What the—" The barrier that was wide open a second ago is now surrounded by thousands of chains. Is it closing again? Inside the pitch-black cave, the air was thick with the stench of bloodlust. A few hours earlier, Li Jun and the Shadow Guards faced off. The Shadow Guards were already in their fighting stances, but he remained calm. One of them shouted, "No matter how strong he is, it doesn't matter. I'll take care of this from now on." Before he could finish his sentence, Li Jun sent his head flying with one palm strike. Minjae trembled in fear. So fast, I couldn't even see it. But he still tried to act tough. "What are you doing? Are you afraid of some high school kid?" The whole group of shadow guards charged like wild beasts. "Attack him! Attack!" Li Jun bent his knees, raised his head, and glanced over their faces. He stomped his foot hard on the ground, and a current of electricity flowed out. It mixed with his spiritual power, forming a unique palm strike. The charging men were electrocuted, screaming in agony. "He's just a coward with a big mouth. I've never met a monster-like bastard like this before." Minze stammered. You think you can get away with this?" "The Shinji clan won't let you off," Li Jun scoffed. "You may have forgotten, but I also carry the blood of the Shinji clan." Hearing that, the man's eyes widened. "With that lowly blood of yours? How dare you!" He grabbed the talkative mouth and squeezed it shut, silencing him for good. Li Jun bent down, savoring the look of terror on his prey's face. "Besides, there's no evidence. Who's going to know that I killed you?" He pulled out a knife, intending to finish off this talkative shadow guard. Li Jun's eyes were vicious. "You guys started this. Don't blame me." Li Jun stood amidst the bloodied corpses. He sighed and glanced behind him as if he had anticipated something. Li Jun commanded, "You over there, come out." The remaining Sukmung crawled out with a subservient posture. "You called for me, sir. What is it?" He closed his eyes slightly. "Clean up these corpses." It hurriedly called its comrades for help. "Yes, sir. The master has given an order. Everyone, get out here. Hurry up." Li Jun watched the bustling Sukmungs and mused. Sukmungs can understand human language and have the intelligence of a middle schooler. They truly are a species that loves to be flattered. He called out, "You." It immediately bowed its head and replied, "Yes." Li Jun patted its head. "From now on, you are the leader of this place. I'm leaving it in your hands." The Sukmung humbly expressed its gratitude. "Thank you, my lord." He placed the knife in its hand. "And one more thing." The Sukmung held the knife and could only manage a strained smile. "Master, what is this?" Li Jun smiled with a friendly expression, but a scheme was brewing within. Clear blue sky. Tall buildings lined the streets. He clutched his bleeding side. Hanjiu and Hiseo sat beside him, worried. She asked frantically, "What happened to you? What happened in there?" He, however, was a bit calmer. "Senior, are you okay?" Li Jun tried to force a reply. "In the secret dungeon. All the guides." Then a sharp voice rang out. Don't say anything." The old master appeared, criticizing him relentlessly. "That was awful. Why is your acting so bad?" He scratched his head, embarrassed. "I'm embarrassed too, so please stop talking." But then something occurred to him and he grew furious. "Damn it! That damn Sukmung! I told it to just slash me a few times!" The Sukmung looked remorseful. "Sorry, master, I just got carried away. Please forgive me." Li Jun lamented about his wound. "How many times did it cut me? Damn, this hurts like hell." He looked at the naive group in front of him. At least they're less suspicious of me now. The MC was still holding his microphone, broadcasting. "We are currently at the entrance to the Hell's Maw. We have confirmed that one student is alive. The whereabouts of the others are still unknown." Then Li Xin ordered from behind, "Move!" The students automatically parted into 2 rows, making way for him. He stood calmly with the reporters, despite the serious situation. The MC introduces Li Xin. To think that the Li Xin, heir to the divine family, would come here in person. He approached Li Jun, his shadow cast long by the evening sun. Li Xin looked down on him with a condescending air. "Speak!" Playing the victim, he recounted, "There was another blue-grade monster there. It was only thanks to Kang Minzi's sacrifice that I was able to make it out alive." He scowled, sneering. "You think I'd believe a squad would sacrifice their lives to save someone? Ha!" Li Jun smirked. "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not." Li Xin gritted his teeth. No one had ever dared to talk back to him like that. "You—" He lunged forward, electricity gathering in his hand. "You bastard!" Li Jun squeezed his eyes shut, looking completely helpless, as if bracing for the blow. But the punch Li Jun was waiting for never came. He opened his eyes in confusion. Hanjiu held a sword pointed directly at his neck, while Hyungjun gripped Li Xin's wrist tightly. Her expression unchanging, she said, "Attacking someone without cause doesn't suit the Council of Noble Families, Senior Li Xin." He seethed. "Why are you protecting him?" Hyungjun explained with a grim face. "Young master, you're attracting attention." But Li Xin angrily shook his hand off. "Get lost!" He scowled so intensely it looked like he could crush 2 flies between his brows, but there was nothing he could do. Lee Jun returned his glare with an equally cold one. Neither one backed down. Hyung-jun announced, "From this moment on, this barrier is under the management of the divine family." He glanced at the teacher. "Inform the chairman. We'll handle this." The teacher looked terrified. Yes, of course." The other students helped him up to bandage his bleeding wound. Hanjiu called out to him, "Lee Jun!" Lee Jun turned back. "Yeah, what is it?" She clenched her fists, questioning him. "Was what you just said the whole story?" He acted shocked. "Are you really asking that of someone who just came back from the dead? I know you're cold-hearted, but still—" Hanjiu slapped him hard on the back. "Fine then, take care." Heisel jumped. "Senior, he's an injured person." At the school, under the shade of green trees filled with the sound of chirping birds, Minjung sat in the teacher's office, sipping a cup of tea. He quietly responded to a knock at the door. "Come in." Hanjiu walked in with the serious expression of a detective. She sat down opposite him. No one spoke, making the atmosphere a bit strange. Minjung took a sip of tea. "How is Lee Jun?" Hanjiu replied somberly. "I was keeping an eye on him, but I still didn't notice anything unusual." He put his teacup down. "Lee Jun truly is a talented student. That's how he was able to fool even you." Minjung then dropped some shocking news. "Just a little while ago, our bank called to report that Lee Jun just sold a mana stone, a high-grade one at that." She was stunned. He added, "And according to the shadow guards at the time, Lee Jun didn't take a single step outside the academy." Hanjiu fell silent. So he really was hiding his abilities. She lowered her head in thought. Now I need to find out just how strong he is, and where that power of his comes from. A smirk appeared on her face as if she'd just found a solid clue. Hanjiu looked up with confidence. "Lee Jun has a deep-seated hatred for the divine family. This is our chance." She patted her chest reassuringly. "Just trust me, uncle. I'll convince Lee Jun." A beach with golden sand and clear blue water reflecting ripe, swaying coconuts. Lee Jun gestured. "Okay, sit down." He held out his hand for Lam Lam to place its paw on. "Good." Lee Jun tossed it a firestone to eat. "Okay, eat up." A flurry of system messages appeared. Lam Lam has successfully absorbed the firestone. Lam Lam's level has increased. Current level, 35. All skill points have been improved. Learned skill, Fire Seed. He picked up Lam Lam, its belly now perfectly round. "Was that good?" Lee Jun's gaze fell on its body. It was still small. It should have gotten at least a little bigger, but its size hasn't changed at all. The system provided a detailed explanation. Fire Seed, Tier 5. This is an infinite flame. It will continue to burn until the opponent is incinerated. Fire Seed output target. The system displayed Lam Lam's status. Basic information. Name, Lam Lam. Growth, 35. Species, Blue Fox. Rarity, Flame attribute. Cuteness, 85. Territory, 2.2. Blue Fox Den. Serene Land. Hideout, Blue Location. Attack power, 0. Special attack speed, none. Special defense, none. He looked at it and wondered, that's strange. Shouldn't the ability points have gone up at least? The old immortal floating beside him explained, "It's possible that even if it reaches B rank or higher, its growth level will remain low. That's how you can understand its current situation." Lee Jun asked worriedly, "So if I find more items like the Firestone for Lam Lam to eat, I'll understand the reason, right?" The old man replied, "That's correct." The immortal, with his vast knowledge, continued, "More importantly, don't forget that you also need to try harder. No matter how you try to hide your identity, the longer you keep a secret, the easier it is to expose. By the time you're discovered, you must become as strong as possible." He obediently replied, "Yes, I'll keep that in mind." The old man calmly reminded him, "But it's already too late." Lee Jun suddenly realized, "What? Oh no, it's time!" He quickly ran into the barrier. "Lam Lam, I'm going to the academy, I'll be back." Lee Jun teleported back to his original spot, stepping out as if nothing had happened. Heisel bowed deeply in greeting. "Senior, you're back." Then she straightened up, embarrassed. "I'll get myself together." "You're hopeless. This guy never changes." Meanwhile, his cell is still all smiles. "Did you sleep well last night? Is your wound feeling any better?" Lee Jun looked down, but then questioned him with a puzzled expression. "We've only met once or twice, and all I remember is a formal greeting. Why are you so concerned about me?" He scratched his nose, a bit embarrassed. "Well, Hisel talks about you like a legend. Senior Lee Jun, the one with countless victories against other seniors in the martial arts club. He scratched his head, unconvinced. I was really impressed, so I admire you a lot, Senior Lee Jun. Lee Jun sighed. Ah, well, he mumbled to himself. I'm too lazy to argue, so I'll just let it be. He tilted his head thoughtfully. Wait. In my past life, there was someone just like this. Lee Jun raised a hand to introduce him. Jun Ah, I'll introduce you to my first reliable subordinate, Guangma ISU, Hisel suggested. Master, please just skip ahead. But Hyukjin paid no attention and just ran off, leaving Lee Jun and Hisel with dumbfounded looks on their faces. Where is Hyukjin going? He was exasperated. Honestly, you should at least finish the introduction before taking off. He hesitated. Right? The boy replied, Hisel's eyes suddenly lit up as if he'd found a real treasure. I'm truly impressed. You're an upright person who doesn't blame your circumstances. You truly are a master! Lee Jun, startled by this excessive enthusiasm, said, you found a good teacher, ISU? He then smiled brightly and introduced himself. That's right. I'm not Insu. My name is... Lost in memories of the past, he was snapped back to reality by a voice calling, Senior Lee Jun? He compared the two faces. Is something wrong? The result was a perfect match, sending a jolt through him. This is insane. Isn't that Heo Insu? Park Hyukjin has really lost his mind. Who plants a spy by changing their entire name? Lee Jun thought with a shiver. Even though his personality is just like Beach Trang Ho. In the future, this madman will become AA rank. He suddenly became friendly, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder as if they were sworn comrades. Lee Jun struck up a conversation. Hey, Hyosu, let's get along from now on, okay? He replied awkwardly, yes. The two walked down the school hallway, arms over each other's shoulders. From behind, Hyukjin charged like a raging bull. Lee Jun, caught by surprise, couldn't dodge in time, and a pathetic scream rang out after the impact. A huge crash echoed out. Lee Jun winced. What the hell was that? He roared, Park Hyukjin! Hyukjin raised a hand to catch him. You're still this weak, huh? Hyukjin asked curiously. But who is this friend of yours? Lee Jun replied with difficulty, my cherished junior. The boy said, yes? As his senior introduced himself kindly. Nice to meet you. I'm your senior, Park Hyukjin from Gyeomryong. Hisel bowed politely. Yes, I am Hisel. He put his hands on his hips and teased, any junior of Jun's is a junior of mine. I'll take care of you just like I take care of him. Yes, it would be an honor. Hyukjin stared at him from top to bottom, as if sizing him up. He chuckled. So, kid, you're from the iron-blooded sword clan? Lee Jun slapped his shoulder. Stop staring. Hyukjin started to offer, do you want to come to... He grumbled. Hey, I wasn't finished talking. He asserted, I found him first this time, got it? Hyukjin retorted sarcastically. Well, this time Hisel's decision is what really matters. Hisel stood to the side, trying with difficulty to intervene. Excuse me? He was completely exasperated. Please don't fight over me. The old immortal fanned himself. That kid is always so composed. He looked down at Lee Jun fooling around. Turns out he can act his age after all. The warm sun shone down on the school cafeteria building. Not even a breeze stirred. He held a pastry, his face long. There's definitely going to be a meeting during lunch. Hyukjin asked, You're not going? He pointed to the side. I'm going to skip it too, just like her, because I want to hang out with you. Hanjiu sat between two stacks of pastries, calmly enjoying each bite. Lee Jun said coldly, Another stalker. Hanjiu, are you a stalker? I've got another member in my party. Meanwhile, Hyukjin was still casually joking around, giving him a high five. He slammed the table and pointed straight at her face. This is no joke, Han Hyukjin. Ever since she came to this school, she's been following me like a shadow. You have no idea. Hanjiu replied coolly, That's right. I like Lee Jun very much. She closed her eyes and thought to herself, Hyukjin, you still have a bright future ahead of you. Hyukjin shook her shoulders forcefully. I can't let you get involved with this asshole. Lee Jun cut in. Do you want to die, Park Hyukjin? He said irritably. And speaking of which, we shouldn't put this off any longer. Let's decide now. Hanjiu, what the hell do you want from me? Hanjiu slowly wiped her mouth. What I want. She pointed directly at him. What I want is you, Li Jun. Li Jun was stunned, but Hanjiu affirmed, is you. Warm sunlight streamed into the student council office. Damn it! Li Xin slammed his fist on the desk in anger. What do they take the student council for? He ground his teeth. They dared to skip the meeting with 2 people, and Hanjiu is even with Li Jun. Sunji frowned. Should I have my people intervene? Li Xin stopped her. Kim Sunji, that would be going too far. Taemin interjected. It's fine, just let Sunji handle it. He yelled, questioning Taemin. You know perfectly well that Kim Sunji always crosses the line. That guy was still calmly explaining, Sina, our rivals are Hyukjin and Hanjiu. Min explained that having Sunji take action would intimidate them. Li Xin could only helplessly offer a word of caution. All right, got it. Just remember to go easy on Hanjiu. As for Li Jun, I can just crush him as I please, right? He smirked. Just leave it to me. At that same moment, in the school cafeteria, Hanjiu was pointing a finger in Li Jun's face. What I want is you, Li Jun. She laid out her offer. If you join my family, I guarantee I will fulfill your every wish. Tell me what you want. Li Jun mulled it over. That's a bold proposal, even though I don't want to be tied down to any particular faction. But I do need an allied power to back me up. He stared intently at her but didn't give an answer yet. And it'd be best if that power had exceptional intelligence. But now isn't the time. Li Jun slowly closed his eyes. Okay, I understand. He slowly began to state, what I want. Then Li Jun pointed directly at Hanjiu. Is you. It was as if the world froze for a few seconds. She was stunned. Huh? He chuckled. Just kidding. Hanjiu replied softly, just forget it. She drew her sword, her eyes filled with killing intent. I'm going to slice you up. Li Jun was startled. What? He shook his head frantically. No, I was just joking. I was just imitating you. Where did Park Hyuk-jin go? Wait, Hanjiu, I'm sorry. A scream echoed throughout the vast building. The sky was high and clear, with white clouds drifting by. Bright sunlight shone down on a corner of the school's rooftop. Having escaped, Li Jun breathed a sigh of relief. That was close. He plopped down onto the ground. I have to see Hanjiu in the next class. She wouldn't swing her sword in the classroom, would she? The old sage reassured him. No one would dare do that. Li Jun complained. Even she has to follow the rules. Suddenly, Hyuk-jin appeared from behind Li Jun. He dodged quickly, startled. When did you get here? Just now, he replied. Li Jun said sarcastically, I thought you disappeared again like last time. Hyuk-jin gestured seriously. More importantly, Hanjiu is still scouring the school for you. He clenched his fist. It's almost time for class. He marveled at Li Jun's talent. Besides, your swordsmanship from earlier was no joke. She said you defeated Li Ki-hong. Our Li Jun has become super strong, huh? Hyuk-jin looked him over, sizing him up. Although you don't really look it. Li Jun held up his hand. That's because I have a good magical artifact with me. He showed him the wondrous ring. This was a gift from someone important to me. This ring can conceal my power. He was endlessly curious. Who would give you something this amazing? Who was it? Li Jun smiled. Well, it's from someone I hold very dear. The old sage awkwardly tried to change the subject. My, the sun is bright today. He flew over and asked, You've told this kid a lot. He explained, Hyuk-jin is okay. Besides, he's someone I can trust. The old sage hesitated. If you say so. Hyuk-jin was joking with Li Jun. Let me try it for a bit. When Hanjiu slammed the door open and stormed in. I finally found you. The two turned their heads with a look of stunned terror in utter disbelief. She lunged as if she wanted to eat Li Jun alive. There's nowhere left to run. Sunji walked up. Oh my, why did you run so fast? All the way to the rooftop? She covered her face, giggling. You even broke the rooftop door. We in the student council need to set an example, Hanjiu. Hyuk-jin seemed wary. Long time no see, Senior Sunji. He turned back to Kim Sunji. Seunji. She's like a living heir of the Manhwa sect. Kim Sunji, the plum blossom, heir to the Jungsan Association, who embodies the martial arts of the Manhwa sect. Li Jun wondered why someone like her would come looking for Hanjiu. He asked cautiously, Is something wrong? Senior? She explained with an air of complete confidence. Because you all didn't attend the meeting, Li Xin is very angry. Sunji smirked. This time he told me to come and teach you all a lesson. Li Jun was startled. Huh? Senior, are you referring to me? She asked, pointing at Hyukjin. Not you. If we laid a hand on you, he wouldn't let it slide. I'm only here to handle these other two. He wondered, why me? Hyukjin patted his shoulder. Take care. Whispers erupted from all sides. Look, Snowflower and Plum Blossom are fighting. Someone else chimed in. This is a preliminary match before the Heavenly Martial Arts Tournament. Hanjiu turned her head. Li Jun, why are you backing away? Shouldn't we fight together? Li Jun explained. It looks like she's targeting you first, so I'm giving you the stage. Sunji sneered. How considerate. Just wait a moment. I'll be done in a flash. He simply smiled back. Yes, senior. She caressed the blade of her sword. Since I'm your senior, I'll make the first move, all right? Sunji lunged and struck at her, but Hanjiu parried it. The two streams of spiritual energy clashed, creating a massive impact. She gritted her teeth and attacked. You stubborn brat! She swung her sword, her gaze sharp, not uttering a single word in response. Hanjiu wrapped a bolt of lightning around her opponent's sword, then dashed in and struck her hand. Just like that, the sword clattered to the ground in front of everyone. She slumped to the ground in utter humiliation. Li Jun held up a camera. Master, what do you think? The old sage gave his critique. The essence of the Plum Blossom sword style is to deceive the opponent's eyes, he said with disappointment. But that child only knows how to rely on physical strength. That's no longer the Plum Blossom sword style. Hanjiu stood formally. I have nothing more to say to you, senior. Please don't bother me again. Sunji trembled with rage. To think things would turn out like this. She roared at her bodyguards. Are you just going to stand there and watch? Sunji ordered. She's alone! All of you, attack! She gently closed her eyes, centering herself, not bothering to focus on these insects. A single strike from Hanjiu was enough to send anyone who dared approach flying. She slowly explained. The cut isn't deep. Hanjiu swung her sword. But if you charge again, swords don't have eyes. Their faces turned pale. Is Hanjiu really that strong? No way, I can't believe it. Seeing the battle was over, everyone began to whisper amongst themselves. Snowflower is really strong, they marveled. Even stronger than the low-level instructors. Someone else hesitated. On the other hand, Plum Blossom, someone interjected, seems to have regressed, hasn't she? The sarcastic remarks were endless. She always skips practice and only knows how to torture the weak. The taunts didn't stop. During the entire break, she just fooled around instead of practicing her martial arts, yet she still expects to improve? That last comment made the veins on her hand pop. Such a waste of talent. Sunji reaches into her pocket for something. Hanjiu! She threw the orb at her. Let's see how long you can keep up that smug attitude. Hanjiu instinctively thrusted her palm forward, but it was no use. This time, her face twisted as if she'd poked the wrong hornet's nest. The orb shot out thousands of sharp needles, intent on piercing its target. She braced herself. There are too many needles. I can't dodge them all. Hanjiu tried to shield herself with her sword, gritting her teeth in frustration. Hanjiu gritted her teeth, staring at the swarm of needles before her. There are too many. I can't possibly avoid them all. Hyukjin cried out in worry. Hanjiu! Blood splattered across the rooftop, creating a stark contrast. Li Jun teased her. Not bad. With that many needles flying right at your face, you didn't even blink. His arm had blocked all the needles for her. But it looks like I ended up saving you again. Li Jun looked at this device that had fallen to the ground. A needle bomb. That's a signature secret technique of the Mando clan. Are you okay? His gaze shifted to his own purplish arm. These needles must have been coated in poison. The old master reassured him, Don't worry. The spiritual energy regulation technique will automatically neutralize the poison. Li Jun rubbed his arm. Thank goodness for that. They've always been known for their ruthlessness. But I never imagined they'd go this far. The old master spoke with a mysterious air. Do you think he intended to leave any traces? He raised an eyebrow. Probably not. A system notification appeared. Side quest. Deal with the bullies. Difficulty. C. Description. The hermits despise the hypocrites within the sect. They want you to teach Kim Seunji. who reminds them of a certain hypocrite, a lesson. Completion condition. Defeat Kim Seung-ji. Reward. Increased affinity with Hanjiu and a reputation boost. Reputation. Description. Reputation is one of the most important assets in the current era. With a high reputation, people will flock to you without much effort. Effect. Increases power, wealth, and fame. A long-forgotten story. The Geol Manson Corporation once betrayed everyone. They didn't just slaughter the awakened. Yes, but ordinary civilians as well. A shocking secret is revealed. One of the pioneer groups became demons. Lee Jun used his spiritual energy to push out all the needles. Let them have a taste of their own medicine. Are you all right? Hanjiu ran over, looking panicked. Are you okay? He waved her off. She should have known better. Seung-ji sat collapsed on the ground, trembling, as large beads of sweat dripped onto the floor. Lee Jun grabbed her by the collar and yanked her up, making her yelp. He spoke in a cold voice. The conditions for using the Mando clan's poison needle bomb— Lee Jun tightened his grip on her collar— are to use it against monsters, or when facing an enemy like the Samarin. He looked down at Seung-ji with contempt. If it's neither of those two, then it's only to be used when your own life is in danger. No matter how powerful this new era becomes, there are rules that even the weak must uphold, she screamed. Shut up! Seung-ji struggled out of his grasp. Who do you think you're lecturing, you worthless commoner? She sneakily reached for her sword. Hanjiu did that, and yet you still— Seung-ji lunged forward in a frenzy. Are you testing me? Hanjiu suddenly let out a panicked scream, trembling in fear. On the other side, Hyuk-jin was equally horrified. A spray of blood hit Lee Jun's face. The girl's pupils contracted as if she had just seen something terrifying. Seung-ji looked up at the sword embedded in his shoulder. What? Lee Jun stood perfectly still. He didn't even move. He calmly pulled the sword out without so much as a change in his expression. Lee Jun lowered the sword, blood dripping down the blade. He stood before her and dropped the weapon, as if proving he didn't need it. Lee Jun raised his hand and began to absorb her spiritual energy. Since you were the one who crossed the line first, everything I do now is simply self-defense. Seung-ji's face was filled with fear. What are you trying to do? Wait, don't come any closer! A glowing pink orb hovered in her chest. Don't! Suddenly, Hanjiu screamed, Don't do it! He was focused on absorbing the pink orb, so he didn't notice her grabbing his outstretched wrist to stop him from doing something foolish. Hanjiu stood in front of the girl. Stop it! Lee Jun replied with the cold expression. Why? You know it too, don't you? With people like this, the only answer is revenge. She gripped his hand tightly, her face slightly flushed and lips pressed together without a word. Hanjiu looked at his murderous expression, deep in thought. This power— She thought back to when she was inside the barrier. It's just like the power I felt before entering the Klarua cave. That bloodthirsty face flashed in Hanjiu's mind again. At that moment, Lee Jin walked in. That's enough. He frowned deeply. What do you all think you're doing? Lee Jun smirked. Seeing the situation, you should already know, right? If you wanted to teach me a lesson, you should have come alone. He spoke nonchalantly, treating him as if he were nothing. The others have suffered for nothing. Lee Jin retorted, You've got some nerve, Lee Jun. Kim Seung-ji is the second daughter of the Geol Manson Corporation. Lee Jun glanced over, unconcerned. So what? Are you afraid the Geol Manson Corporation will retaliate? Then you should have been the one to discipline Kim Seung-ji from the start. He gritted his teeth. I don't know what you're talking about. Lee Jin spoke with a self-righteous air. As the heir of the clan, I must be mindful of our relationships with the other factions. Right? He walked past him as if he was thin air. An heir. An heir who isn't even sure of his right to succeed. Lee Jin became furious. What's that supposed to mean? You sanctimonious bastard, Lee Jun. If you keep criticizing others like this, you'd better be careful. So smug. I'll probably outlive him, you know. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow of dusk. The tall building with black glass windows reflected the evening twilight. In his private room, Lee Jun was working on his computer. The system displayed a notification about his current attributes and power. He murmured with delight. Finally, I have reputation points. Special section. Inner power, 450 out of 1,000. Mental strength, 300 out of 300. Reputation, promising talent. Wealth, fame, or power, Li Jun desired them all once he reached A rank or higher. You gain reputation. The higher the reputation, the better you are treated by clans, guilds, and the government. Reputation was also very important to him. There's a fierce battle among organizations to recruit talented individuals. Reputation is truly a crucial factor for the awakened. Li Jun smirked. From now on, it's a new beginning. The elder immortal advised, to follow in the footsteps of the greatest on the golden peak. You still have a long road ahead of you. He boasted in his aura of light, in my day I was a formidable opponent in Gangho. He paid no mind and clicked a button on the computer. With a stretch, Li Jun said, I'm going to check on Lam Lam. The elder worried, huh? If you move your arm like that? He watched Li Jun wince. It's going to hurt for a while. He clutched his arm, screaming internally. Li Jun grumbled, You should have said something sooner. The elder was having none of it. You have only yourself to blame. Li Jun scowled. What did you say? As the two bickered, they didn't notice a breaking news notification on the computer screen. Martial Arts Academy video leak. Chen Ho and Lam Lam reaches 40,000 views in 5 hours. Li Jun re-watched this moment Hanjiu and Sonji fought before the entire school. This intensity? Oh my god, is Snowflower fighting Plum Blossom? Seriously? She screamed and launched a sneak attack on Hanjiu. Let's see how long you can hold your head up high. He was bewildered. What was that? Did Plum Blossom just throw something? I paused and zoomed in, but what is that? Everyone around was terrified when she unhesitatingly slashed, destroying the needle bomb. Hanjiu and Li Jun, watching, muttered to himself, That's a needle bomb from the Mando clan. She threw it at someone? And at Snowflower, no less. What's wrong with the Jomson group? They're in big trouble. He got furious and smashed the computer. What the hell is this? The hell? At the same time, Inje's son was reporting, Father, the media has started to pick up the story. The public's reaction isn't good either. His head was spinning. Who filmed and uploaded this video? The son hesitated. It was Li Jun, from the Divine Power Clan, sir. Hearing this, Inje suddenly remembered the Divine Power Clan. He glared as the old, bearded Minguk casually walked in. You caused all this trouble, and you still have the nerve to show your face here for help? The old man nonchalantly stated, The Divine Power Clan cut ties with Li Jun a long time ago. Then Minguk lowered his head menacingly. And if it really was Li Jun who uploaded that video, then our chairman will probably be quite pleased with our proposal. The old man said decisively, I'm here to request Li Jun's assassination. Simultaneously, Li Jun's computer screen displayed, Delete all my spam mail. He wondered, I've deleted all the emails. I wonder if they've found out and will contact me. Li Jun sat comfortably in his chair and uttered the most narcissistic sentence possible. Now, the alliance of 15 clans will be trying to recruit me. The elder asked, Will you join them? Li Jun scoffed. Joining an organization would only limit my options. His eyes were filled with affection. You can do whatever you want. You'll be strong enough to stand on your own, he exclaimed. Well said. Li Jun wanted to drain everything, but I'll still consider buying insurance. For now, let's make the most of this pawn. The elder's eyes widened in surprise. You have a plan? But he didn't hesitate for a second. Of course. Before I demand the martial arts manual from that pawn, I plan to get the flower of succession first. He explained the flower he mentioned. The flower of succession is also known as the flower of the gods. It's an incredible item that can reset learned martial arts skills. Li Jun thought to himself, From now on, Heosu will have to learn special techniques. He was extremely cautious. Performing the ascending sword technique with the old method not only reduces its power, but can also be life-threatening to Heosu if his internal energy leaks. Li Jun worried, The flower of succession only grows in dark, harsh places. I know the location of one that hasn't bloomed yet. A moment later, in a desolate desert, Li Jun played with his pet. Lam Lam, you all right? Then he smiled and asked the mole vermin, How are you two doing? Still alive, are we? Tegu approached respectfully. Master, you have arrived. He was grateful for Li Jun's help. Thanks to the materials you provided, Master, we are living quite well. He was curious. Good to hear. By the way, your name is Tegu? The small creature quickly answered, Tegu, Master. Li Jun just touched his shoulder, and the creature flinched. Right. Tegu. From now on, you're in charge here. His eyes widened as he looked at the mole cowering before him. Why are you trembling? Are you afraid I'm going to hit you again? Right. Li Jun warned him. I've already gotten my revenge for last time. Your face is already a wreck, so there's nothing left to hit anyway. Do you understand your mission? Tegu was scared to death, his words unclear. Master, you said we have to live here, right? I understand. He entrusted him with the task. You will lead the others to create small paths between the different gates. The mole obeyed instantly. Yes, we will work hard. The moles immediately responded with enthusiasm. Elder Sion suddenly appeared right behind him. Huh? What are those monsters planning to do? Li Jun explained calmly. The succession flower will wilt the moment it leaves the gate. To move the flower to my gate, there's no other way but... He puffed out his chest, looking at his useful minions. The gate-bending technology they're creating to connect the places, and then move the flower. The old man seemed confused. Why not just bring Heo-su here and have him eat the succession flower directly? Li Jun's face suddenly darkened. Master, that is a truly vicious suggestion. You're truly something else. What do you take me for? Am I not your disciple? I already have a plan. Meanwhile, in the city, Yu Liang's secretary reported, Sir, I've found the target. He was furious. But your searching is useless. Where is he? Well, she said softly, the target has entered the blue gate, the great labyrinth. Yu Liang arrogantly propped his feet on the table and questioned her. The great labyrinth? Isn't that an unconquerable gate? Why did he go in there? The secretary hesitated. I'm not sure, sir. He shot to his feet. It doesn't matter. The chairman wants this finished as soon as possible. Then Yu Liang opened the door for his lackeys, his brothers, and left arrogantly. Let's show him what happens when you mess with the Divine Power Clan. Meanwhile, in a peaceful forest, a deer was strolling along a path when the sound of footsteps nearly made its heart leap out of its chest. It was the eerie appearance of Li. Jun made the cute little deer bolt. He, meanwhile, was struggling with the mud and moss underfoot. So hard to move. I'll just look around here. Suddenly, a light from the side of the path shone straight into Li Jun's face. His eyes lit up as if he'd struck gold. Li Jun exclaimed excitedly, Found it! The succession flower! He immediately used his magic to call upon the mole corpses, summoning the gate. The vermin quickly appeared. Master, you've finally arrived! We've been waiting for you. Li Jun pointed at the flower. Look, dig a gate surrounding this flower. Tegu, the leader, wondered, What is this? It doesn't look like anything ordinary. He explained, That's the succession flower. Hearing this, the mole's eyes nearly popped out of his head. This is the succession flower? But Li Jun was unfazed. Yeah, since we can't cut it and take it with us, we have to move the whole thing. Tegu was already scheming. With this, humanity is doomed. Seeing this, he ran over and clapped Tegu on the shoulder, snapping him out of his daydream. Every one of Li Jun's words hit the mark. Interested in it, are you? Tegu was so scared he could barely speak, shaking his head frantically. I'm not interested at all! He then dangled a juicy piece of bait. Who knows? If everything goes well, I might share a little with you. Tegu immediately changed his tune. I will work diligently. Li Jun started to leave. Well then, I'm counting on you. The mole was startled. You're not coming with us, master? He put on a mysterious air. I'll follow later. I still have a few things to do.